The main character went to the university in the early morning, and arriving at the place he was shocked by what he saw. There was no one in the university and even the classrooms were in a terrible state. He walked around the classrooms and finding no one, he thought that he was the only one who had come to study today. And even no matter how much he waited, even the bus never came. And finding no choice, he had to head home on foot. As he slowly headed home, he saw that even the streets were quiet. So he decided that he would take a nap when he got home and see if it was all just a dream. But when he arrived home, he notified his parents that he was home. But the house was empty and his mother was gone. But suddenly he looked up at the clock at home and was surprised. And it all seemed strange to him. After all, he had earlier left the uni at about the same time. He decided to open his phone too and make sure that the home clock was wrong, but he saw something different. The time on the phone was the same. He began to reflect on the fact that it had taken him 2 hours to get home, and the sun was in the same place. And he was wrapped up in a feeling like time had stopped for everything, except for himself. But suddenly an unfamiliar voice sounded and confirmed his words. Turning around, he saw huge white wings and a beautiful girl with long hair. The girl told him that Earth time had stopped, but not for the protagonist. The protagonist couldn't say a word after that, but managed to ask her who she was. The girl answered him that she was exactly who he thought she was just now, trying to elevate his tribe. The protagonist thought hard and assumed she was a homemaker. But the girl heard that and started to deny it, and showed him that she had wings and a white dress, and asked him if it wasn't obvious. The protagonist thought a little more, and then decided she was a cosplayer, but the girl replied that she wasn't. Seeing that he couldn't figure out who she was, she decided to introduce herself, saying that she was a messenger of the god angel, and her name was Lita. And the reason she came to him is to tell him that he is a straggler. Hearing such a word, the protagonist simply changed, and his eyes became small. He immediately recalled his childhood memories of being forgotten and left behind during a field trip in elementary school. Then in middle school, he had it all over again, and even in high school too. And he wasn't even called to the student assembly at the university, and now he doesn't understand why this keeps happening to him. Lita notified him that everyone went to another world, but except for the protagonist. The guy didn't know why that was so. Lita replied that a great catastrophe would soon overtake the Earth. And now for starters, she will explain what it is, and then they will talk about it. The great catastrophe is when the Earth moves to a new level because it has gained maximum experience. For humans, this will mean that mana is now available, and there will be access to the Akasha timeline. Humanity will be able to use that data, and they call that status. The protagonist listened and quite simply understood everything she told him. Lita decided to praise herself by showing that she was a good teacher. But that was not all, because the most terrible thing will be that, along with mana will appear, and monsters. You can't take them with normal weapons. The protagonist watched her talk and saw her as a real cosplayer. But Lita was telling him that if they left humanity in its current state, the risk of total annihilation would be huge. So now the god has stopped time and sent everyone to another world. There they would have the opportunity and time to train in the use of mana. More specifically, their bodies are in a safe place, and their avatars have been sent to another dimension. And because of such given opportunities, they can learn. This way they will have the basic skills to fight monsters. The protagonist decided to ask, can't monsters be destroyed with firearms or explosions? Angel replied that they are made of highly ranked energy. Even a nuclear bomb wouldn't be enough. And now the protagonist realized what it was all for. Angel began to believe that God is very merciful to people. After all, he organized training on such a scale. The guy was tired of hearing about the world and decided to find out what about himself. Lita turned around and replied that she thought it was a mistake. Hearing this, the protagonist started to ask her to fix it. But the girl replied that the portal had already closed, so she had no option to fix it. And his stealth is astounding. Even God didn't notice him. The protagonist came out of his conditioning and started to learn, how can a supreme being be so dumb? He can't even believe it. And now he's asking her to send him to another world, and he will start using mana. The angel replied that the merciful God was sorry for his problem and decided to give him a bonus. But the protagonist didn't want that and asked her to teach him how to use mana, and she wouldn't make it before disaster struck. Lita decided to cheer him up and told him that the others would be back in 10 years and he would organize some food, and he was told to wait here. The protagonist was saddened and didn't even realize what he would do alone for 10 years. Lita heard this and offered to train him to prepare him for the monsters coming. The guy didn't know if it would do any good since he didn't know how to use mana. Lita decided that she would just make him physically stronger. The boy hesitated but still asked her to send him to the others. But Angel answered all the same that it was impossible. And so began his lonely life on Earth. 5 years had passed since the disappearance of the humans. And in all that time, he had been practicing hard, while the other humans were perfecting their mana skills. And they were also getting stronger against the monsters. And all that was left for him was to increase his physical strength. Lita had been by his side the whole time and decided to ask him if he was tired of doing the same thing for 5 years. The protagonist, through pain and sweat, answered her that he had no choice. Lita realized that he was completely right and gave him one last smile, transferring it all to a joke. But Lita looked at him with her beautiful eyes and saw that protagonist Yu Ilhan had gotten pretty good and was much stronger. He appeared to have a steady stamina. After all, it was usually difficult for people to focus on one activity. She shared with him her theory that Ilhan was just an unusual person. It was already clear from the fact that he had hidden himself from God. Ilhan replied that he didn't do it on purpose, and realized that Lita was the only one he could talk to. She visits him once a week. She also cooks for him. When it's time to eat, the table is automatically furnished with food. And to be honest, it tastes even better to him than his mom's cooking. It also makes it easy for him when the dishes automatically disappear too. And after eating, he finishes his physical training and moves on to learning martial arts and weaponry. Lita wondered how he would do it without a teacher. Ilan replied that he would find the guide on the internet. In this world right now, he has electricity and the internet works. And thus he decided to study from the videos he had put off in the past. But Ilhan wondered how the internet could work in such a world. Lita replied that time has stopped. The protagonist didn't understand anything and asked her to explain it normally. But Lita turned around and smiled, closing the whole topic. The next day, Ilhan went out for training in the forest and demonstrated his new stick-wielding abilities. Lita watched everything and let him know that the basic elements needed to be given time as well, though he still had 5 more years of it. Ilan paid no attention to her and continued to learn martial arts. Lita watched every move he made and knew he had been doing it for 4 years. But she didn't care about that time. She enjoyed watching him. Suddenly, she offered to be his sparring partner. After all, he would develop faster with an opponent. Ilan asked her if she was really suggesting him to fight with her. Lita replied that was correct and informed him not to worry and to attack already. Ilhan realized that even though she had given him permission, could he hit his new angel? Making this move, he distracted her and immediately pounced on her, giving her a taste of 9 years of loneliness and frustration. But Lita was much faster than him and taught him a lesson, leaving him with a couple of bruises. But really, she was born to fight. She asked him if he understood, that he shouldn't worry but train with her, and the mutilation was just a free bonus for him. Ilan was upset after the beating and didn't want to train with her anymore. So he asked her for a chance to refuse. But Lita was serious and let him know to do it again. But it ended the same way. The protagonist got a couple more bruises on his face. 10 years later, Lita approached him and informed him that with this level, he would have no problem defeating a low-level monster. And with a level up, he would be able to use mana. After all, she had personally trained him, so he wouldn't have any problems. Ilhan didn't agree with her words about training because she had actually drummed it all into him. Lita was shocked during all this time, for he had done a very good job. And once the disaster started, a lot of things would change. Ilan shook her hand and asked if they could see each other again. Lita answered him that it all depended on him. After saying goodbye to her, he went out into the forest and realized that there was not much left before the people returned. It had been so long since he had seen anyone, and even a little nervous. He felt sorry in his heart to say goodbye to Lita, but he could finally get back to his normal life. Closing his eyes for a few minutes, he waited for people to appear, but no one came and no one appeared in his world. Lita looked back up from the sky and didn't see anyone either. She didn't know what had happened. Ilan immediately became angry in a flash and asked for her to explain everything to him. Why no one showed up? Lita came down from the sky and replied that she thought there was a mistake. Following those words, she got a bunch of others in which Ilhan hated her. He collapsed to the ground and like a little child asked how much longer he had to wait. But if all he has to do is wait, but he will. However, after 10 years, then 20 years, and now 50 years later, no one has ever returned. Ilan had continued to train for his physical fitness all this time. But for that, he had already traveled to the mountains where he practiced hitting rocks. Lita still kept moving with him and saying that he was so strong that she didn't even doubt him. After 50 years, the protagonist stopped keeping track of time. But seeing his gaze at this moment, Lita realized that here, something was wrong. Ilan shared with her that he no longer remembered what his mother looked like. Angel felt his pain and showed that she was sorry. But Ilhan didn't stop asking her about the remaining time of people's arrival in the world, and shared with her that he was already tired of martial arts. But Lita still said that disaster could strike at any moment. There was no stopping training, and hoped that Ilhan wasn't desperate. After all, if he is, but things won't go the way she sees and wants them to. Ilhan replied that he was aware of everything, and reading books is enough in his level. Hearing those words calmed her down, for the protagonist had not given up yet. She encouraged him that he had said all the right things. Soon he started reading around the clock, and he started with contemporary literature. Then he moved on to business books, and then he moved on to school and university subjects. And so soon he read everything in the library. But suddenly he decided it would be good for him to learn other languages. And soon he was on a journey, and he started with neighboring China. Then he followed Russia, America, and all the countries along the way. He learned several languages and read most of the books of the world. Soon a very long time passed. As he closed the last book, he realized that he had read everything. And it was his last book, even Lita saw. But Ilhan wondered what he should do now. Lita asked him if he was tired after such a hard day. But Ilhan replied that he had no time to be tired. After all, there were many things to do before the disaster began. She saw that the protagonist, even after several hundred years of loneliness, continued to believe that people would return. And it was all preparation for the disaster. Lita decided to suddenly pray and ask the Lord God to bring the humans back while Ilhan was still holding on. The next morning, he immediately headed into the forest and began hunting wild animals. At that moment, a wild boar was strolling through the forest. Ilhan picked the perfect moment and hit the wild boar. He was happy about his new victory, and after reading all the books, he began to try his hand at leatherwork and blacksmithing. He opened his knives in front of him and saw nothing complicated yet, but he decided to start with wild boar. But suddenly it occurred to him and he asked, what if he killed all the animals? There would probably be nowhere for monsters to appear. Lita realized that she had given him permission to hunt them. But if he killed all the animals, it would upset the balance of the world. So she started to tell him where monsters come from, but then she abruptly changed her mind. Ilhan was surprised and asked her why she had stopped talking. It's not like she's teasing him, but Lita asked him to pretend he hadn't heard anything. But Ilhan didn't care about that anymore, and decided to just go about his business as a butcher. Lita watched all of this and didn't understand how he managed to handle everything he took on. And it's been 274 years, a long time even for an angel. And it's amazing that someone who normally has no more than 100 years to live can spend so long doing nothing but preparing for the future. Ilan was suddenly happy and said that everything was ready, and not bad for the first time. Lita began to think he was an incredible person for such a long time. After a while, he got to the final goal of the cutting training, and this time it was a sperm whale standing in front of him. Lita was angry with him after all. They are an endangered species and it is forbidden to hunt them. But Ilhan gave her permission to close her eyes. And she could already call him Ishmael. Lita asked him immediately to stop making jokes, for there was no one here to laugh. After hundreds of years, he learned how to strip and master leather. Learning to blacksmith took much longer. But it seems simple when you read it. But for him it was easy and clear. But in practice it was much more difficult. While striking, he immediately noticed his hand slipping, and his sword broke. Immediately after failing, he got angry and started to think that his hands were growing out of his ass. And he was so bad. For the first time, the blades broke all the time. It took 5 years to create a simple sword. Ilan looked over his work and decided he had done poorly. Lita took the sword from his hands and decided to inspect it. She informed him that it couldn't even slice radishes with it. Ilhan was upset and replied that he had not asked to cut anything and asked for his sword back. Lita did not give it back to him and decided to take it as a souvenir. Ilan was displeased and shocked. Lita told him that God had sent her to help him after all, and he should be grateful. Ilhan was even angrier at her words and asked her to stop pissing him off. Lita flew up into the sky and embraced the main character's work and became much happier. As time passed, he had already tried to create all kinds of weapons, long swords, spears, axes, hammers, and some other things. Then another 50 years passed. He began to inspect his work, and he was a little dissatisfied. But he still wasn't perfect, and he should try harder. He kept repeating and repeating until he was satisfied with the result. All he had was plenty of time. And after equipping the hammer for 100 years, and after such a long time, he finally succeeded. In 100 years of trying, he had created a masterpiece. Lita looked and praised him that his persistence is truly amazing, and it's the best spear she's ever seen. But with the advent of mana, there will be other materials, much more powerful than steel. Ilan decided immediately, 100 will make a new one. Lita looked at him with admiration and saw that he really never gave up. So after cutting meat and blacksmithing, he went back to practicing martial arts and lost track of time. Lita saw that the main character was constantly improving, and several generations of development in one person. But 1,000 years had already passed. Sooner or later, he will reach the limit, and she can't even figure out what will happen then. And it would be great to find something new for him to do, something he's never done before. And now it occurred to her to build a relationship with the opposite sex. But that thought made her uncomfortable, because she's an angel, and how could she think of such vulgarity? But her mission is to help him. It's just an order, not her wishes. And now it's right. And if he needs to be helped, she'll do her best. But Ilhan saw Lita and decided to find out what she was doing. She didn't hear him. So the main character decided to come closer and find out if something was wrong. Lita flew up and asked him what he was talking about, and didn't realize in her head how she could bring it up. Lita suddenly came right up to his face and looked into his beautiful eyes. Ilan suddenly turned to her, and Lita thought that he had guessed everything. The protagonist immediately changed the topic of conversation and prompted her as her sword began to move. Lita saw this and didn't know what it meant, but the sword immediately flew out from her waist and headed into the sky. She immediately flew after the sword, for it was Ilhan's first sword, and she couldn't lose it. But suddenly he changed his gaze and saw that there was something different about him. And it was the clothes he was wearing when time stopped. And he realized that everything was returning to its original state. And Lita caught her sword and begged God not to take that sword away from her. But she turned around and looked at the world and saw that disaster had begun. And Ilhan was frightened, for his body flew up. But he was happy because he had something new for himself. Lita saw it and asked him to stop. And it couldn't be, and was upset that they didn't even say goodbye. But he was happy that she still had at least the sword, and she'd overreacted, and now she was taking it back. She clutched at her heart, for she realized that she had grown very attached to Ilhan during this time, and she doesn't even know if they will meet again. And she didn't even have time to kiss. At this time, the protagonist looked at her from the ground and couldn't believe that they would part ways like this. He was saddened too, because of the fact that they didn't say goodbye. But he remembered that Lita had said she was an angel, a creature of the highest level. And now if he reached her level, would they ever meet her again? The next day, things began to change in the protagonist's world. The people who had previously disappeared arrived at their home. Also, the world became the same at that moment when time had not stopped yet, and Ilhan saw it all with his own eyes. But there were exceptions. A status appeared in front of him, one that said he was unemployed and at level 1. Seeing the status window in front of him, he realized one thing: a great disaster had begun. The other people also rejoiced that in this world, they too could open a status window, and it had only been 10 years. Ilan was surprised that for the rest of humanity, a decade had passed, and it seemed that only for him things lasted that long. But the humans began to resent the fact that their stats had rolled back, and everything went back to the initial characteristics. The people were very upset because they had worked so hard to raise them. Ilan thought it was strange because there were so many people around him and no one noticed him. It was as if he had become invisible to them all. But suddenly he saw in his status that he had active stealth skill and at the maximum level. He figured it was because of his ability, but he decided to deactivate it, but he couldn't do it. The protagonist became very angry that it was his destiny from birth to death to be alone. But he left it at that and headed home. But he heard people cheering for him to come home. But he was glad to see people on the streets after all this time. Toward evening, he got home. He heard an all too familiar voice, and when he opened his eyes, he saw his mother in front of him. She was someone whose face he had already forgotten. Ilan hugged his mother and was happy that she had returned. His mother was happy to see her son again. At that moment, all his memories came alive when he saw her. It was his mother he hadn't seen in 1,000 years. Like this beautiful sunset, and the aroma of dinner cooking, the butter churning in the pan, and his father reading the newspaper at the table. Everything was before. Suddenly, father at the table began to resent that there was no news about Haisha. But mother was surprised that her husband was in Haisha. After all, she and her neighbors had gotten into Yamen. But Ilhan noticed what something had changed in his family. His father began to say that it was perfect in Haisha, but he never found rice there. And there was no way his mother could learn how to control mana. It was so hard for her. And the protagonist couldn't even get a word in edgewise. But suddenly his mother asked him where his son was. Ilan thought about everything and decided that he would not say that he was left on the ground. They would only worry in vain. Ilhan answered his parents that it was a place without a name, but father decided to talk about the mana control he was having a hard time in. But mother agreed with him and didn't know if it made sense to take newborns, old people, and even pregnant women to make them go through those 10 years of training. They took Bai young and strong. But Ilhan decided to intervene in their conversation and replied that the balance should not be disturbed. There was no choice, even though it was not very effective. The parents were surprised and did not understand their son what he was talking about. What kind of efficiency and balance is he talking about? Ilan brushed it off and replied that he was just guessing, and now realized that he needed to think about what he was saying, or raise suspicions. But the mother didn't stop asking and decided to find out how his son was doing. After all, she had heard, you can make a lot of money if you learn to control mana well, and monster bodies sold well. His father replied that such people were rare, but they could definitely get rich. It was strange for Ilhan to hear all sorts of gamer terms from his ancestors, but the protagonist decided to tell it like it is, and putting chopsticks on the table, said he had something to say. He admitted to his parents that he couldn't use mana. His parents were unsurprised at his words and suggested that he focus on his studies. And his father thought it was all his genes' fault. Ilhan was a little surprised that they took it so lightly, and now it probably didn't matter anymore. And now he was glad that everything was back to normal. But upon entering his room, the light suddenly came on, and he was surprised to see his spear standing in the corner of the room. He didn't know why it was there. He thought it had disappeared with everything else when the world rolled back, and figured Lita must have put so much effort into making sure that sword wasn't taken away. It was her handiwork, too. Ilan started waving it around and he didn't care, because it was gorgeous, and he wouldn't have to look for something else to fight monsters. After that, a status opened in front of him where he saw the characterization of his spear. Seeing that the characterization of his spear was 800, he didn't even realize whether it was a lot or a little. He left it for another day and decided to start gathering information. Opening his computer, he saw a lot of posts, and after reading all the books of the world, it is so great to see something new. After returning from another world, people immediately rushed to put all the information they got on the internet. First of all, he needs information on how to level up and how strong you need to be to defeat monsters. And it seems to him, a normal person can handle a level 5 monster. In the other world, you had to get up to at least level 7 to become a low-rank fighter. From level 10, you could get the classes of archer, swordsman, and so on. From level 50, strong fighters start to get a second class, and the third class is at the 100th level. From that point on, a person is considered a national treasure. Because of the hellish conditions for getting class 3, no one has ever even reached class 4. Most people think that 4th and 5th class is the level of a dragon or behemoth. And before lying down to rest, he thought that he wouldn't learn anything else useful this way, and he'd try asking around at university. One word about Univern didn't make him wonder what time he wasn't there, and somehow everyday life hadn't changed much, unlike the world. But he even missed Lita already. She'd be glad to hear that. But suddenly he heard a strange sound and immediately asked, "Who's there?" Turning around, on the other side appeared a girl who said that she was sent by the heavens to help him, to teach him how to use mana. Ilan began to shout that an intruder had come to him, but the girl replied that she was not an intruder, and introduced herself as Erta Angel. Ilhan was shocked that once again an angel had barged into his life with her foot, but she was much smaller than Lita. Erta began to tell him that mana is hard to control. That's why God creates avatars to send to another world for 10 years for training. Ilhan got upset and replied that God didn't do that for him. That's why Erta came to him. After all, someone wanted her to help a backward person. She told her that it wasn't fair to leave him to his own devices when he had put so much effort into training, and asked her to send an angel to help him, to teach him mana control as soon as possible. And he could praise her. She had done such a good job after all. Ilhan wondered why she didn't come herself then. Erta replied that the superiors were concerned about the close relationship between a high-level angel and a human. That's why they sent her. The protagonist understood everything and wanted to see Lita badly. But Erta said that he was nothing like the man she had told him about. Elin wondered why. Erta opened the status in front of him and answered that with this level of physical fitness, he could put down a weak monster with his bare hands. Lita decided beforehand that Ilhan needed to be taken care of. He had been alone for 1,000 years, and the only one who can't use mana. And didn't she feel sorry for him? Erta knew that Lita was just pretending to be a harmless angel, and now she had no choice. She had already been assigned the mission. She praised the guy, for he had worked very hard on training his body, and she would be helping him use his mana. Ilhan didn't know how to help use? Erta climbed on his head and replied that she only needed to be near him to activate it. He is, after all, a supreme creature. And from his mere presence, all mana-related stats would increase 10 times faster. Even 1,000 years spent with Lita did nothing, since mana didn't exist before the disaster. But now, besides the calculation, about a year would be enough. Ilhan wondered if she would sit there all that time. Erta replied that she was wearing a spell. The lower creatures would not notice, so there was no need to worry. But Ilhan said that wasn't the problem. But he didn't understand how he would be with the shower. And what about his love life? Erta was straightforward and answered that there was nothing to hide there. Ilhan said that at least he wants to be alone in the bathroom. And that's not the only problem. He won't be able to watch 2 terabytes of his treasures. Erta told him directly that she doesn't care about the affairs of inferior beings, and there's no need to worry. Elin was shocked that she could read his mind, but Angel let him know that she didn't care if he could break dance or rubma, and he could play DDR all he wanted. But the main character cared about that. But when he heard about the game, he asked her, what did she say? And how did she even know about it? Erta replied that the higher creature didn't care about how the lower ones were having fun. But Ilhan could see that she was lying, because she had a grin on her face. But Angel replied that she was just imagining it. Elin was greatly displeased with her and asked Lita to go back to him. Erta countered by saying that they would spend the whole year together, and he just needed to get over it. And so began his life with the little intruder. The next day came the first trip to school in 1,000 years. His routine was finally over, but suddenly he saw Erta on his head and asked her, is she going to sit there 24 hours a day? Erta replied that the others don't see her, and let him not pay attention either. Ilhan didn't really understand how to do that, so he asked her to stop dangling her feet in front of his eyes. But it also seemed to him that Angel was mocking him. Erta replied that the master had indeed imagined it. But suddenly, turning around, he saw men with machine guns, and life hadn't fully returned to normal yet, and he was unlikely to return. He understood that the state was preparing the army for the appearance of the monsters, but he wasn't sure how effective it would be. But he still remembered Lita telling him that only mana would work against strong monsters. Arriving at his classroom, he had another day as an invisible man. He tried to turn off the stealth skill, but he was having no luck. Erta looked over his status and praised him for a pretty good skill, but Ilhan thought it was more of a loser skill. But Erta replied that she didn't say he was good, just that he wasn't bad. But he had heard people talking about skills, and how they got it the hard way, and some even got 2 of each. Ilhan asked the angel, what were they talking about? Erta replied that they were combining a small amount of mana and a measly amount of experience to get something that could be used against monsters. And the point of view of him, the supreme creature, even combining the skills of all the people here, doesn't compare to his disguise. And that's why she says he's not bad. But what Ilhan really wanted was a different skill. Still, with him, it's easy to overhear other people's conversations. Not even his gaze is noticed by anyone. And at the end, he gets a chance to get information. Suddenly, there was a conversation about the Empress, and it seemed to them that that girl studied in their uni. The guys were sure that no one knows for sure, and they would realize when the monsters showed up. Ilhan didn't know which Empress either, and thought that some of the students showed outstanding talent in the other world. They even gave her a pseudonym like that. But they even wondered when the dungeon would appear, and with their level, there's no way to enter it anyway. And now Ilhan found out that there are dungeons that have restrictions. He decided to ask Erta, what is a dungeon? The angel answered that it is a trap. The protagonist was surprised to hear about the trap. Erta told him that it is a trap created by a god. First, he puts food in the dungeon to lure monsters, and when enough of them gather, he locks them inside. Unlike monsters, humans are free to go in and out as long as they meet the requirements. And a place where humans can hunt relatively safely is called a dungeon. Ilhan wondered, then why not just lock all the monsters in there permanently? It's not like they can't get out. Angel replied that dungeons have a lifespan. That's why people have to clean them up in time. And then there are monsters that are too smart to fall into that trap. Monsters who can break it and who create their own traps. So it's best not to let your guard down. Ilan was getting frustrated a lot because this is all complicated for him. Suddenly the door opened and a professor came in to check their attendance. The professor gave them a long lecture, which did not correspond to his subject, and said that they should adapt to the changed world. The UN has already banned the free use of mana and also introduced controls on raising levels. In China and other strong powers are focused on monsters and how the world will change under the influence of mana. And depending on Korea's actions, many firms will go bankrupt and others will get rich. Ilhan thought his stories were a waste of time, so he came here to study. And he began to wonder if he should even pay the huge sums of money to study here. What would a bachelor's degree mean in the new world? But the use of mana would be much more in demand than some paperwork. And the best way to train, monster hunting, said Erta. But Ilhan didn't want to do anything dangerous. She explained that they were in the beginning stages of the disaster. The monsters were still weak. It's better to kill as many weak ones as possible while they have the chance to raise their level and mana. But the protagonist informed her that he was still at level 1 and can't use mana at all. Erta gave a surprised look and told him that he had superior physical strength. It would be enough for monsters below level 25. The protagonist was a bit shocked and didn't even know that he had physical strength. Erta at this moment was overjoyed, for she saw perfect luck and decided to practice right away. They heard strange voices outside and immediately ran to the window. There were strange creatures outside the window at this time, and apparently a battle for the land had begun. Ilan looked with wonder out of the window and realized that they were monsters. The angel immediately realized that the training was over, and now humanity would have to survive on its own. The students immediately began to worry and think, what should they do and where to run to? But what are the army and the government doing? But one of the disciples suggested to the others that they could join him for a hunt if they wished. The willing one entered the battle with the monsters and died immediately. The disciples fell into fear after that and started running away. Ilan stood still at this point and didn't understand why they all started running away. He realized that he had been left alone again. Erta replied that she didn't expect anything else from him. The protagonist realized that it wasn't his fault, and something had to be found. Erta decided to ask him if he wanted to fight them. The guy took a closer look and saw that they looked weaker than a sperm whale. Angel told him that the monsters were different from normal animals. Their skins are unusually tough and they are stronger. But it seems that below level 20 shouldn't cause him any problems. Ilan at this point broke a chair leg and tried swinging with it, and saw that he was doing well. Erta saw that he had a strong spirit and strong muscles. Up to level 25, there would be no problem. He immediately crafted himself a sharp wooden blade, and now he would be good for battle. Erta praised him for making a suitable weapon on his knee. Could it be that he was learning a craft? The protagonist smiled and didn't realize it was so noticeable. He had a lot of free time on his hands. Lita had said earlier that the god must realize how cute and defenseless Ilhan was. I mean, he doesn't know how to do anything at all, and you can't leave him behind again. Erta now saw another thing, that the protagonist is completely different from her words, and he doesn't know who is cute and defenseless. And this is the result of extreme training, Ilhan realized, and he should have brought his spear with him. He decided to wonder if the camouflage skill wouldn't work if he started attracting attention, and he would like to hide his identity somehow. Erta answered him that the mask would be enough. The monsters at this moment were destroying his city and ruining all the sculptures. Ilhan at this moment put a mask on his face, and with his swords decided to attack him from above. With great speed, he kicked him right in the head and finished him off with a single blow. The system immediately showed that he had gained 800 experience points and reached immediately level 3 stamina, and mana increased by 2, and strength and agility increased by level 3. Ilhan got excited because he saw what a level increase looked like. Levels are a system of Akasha Chronicle records in which you can become stronger by defeating monsters. And by taking an opponent's life, he gained not only a Chronicle record and experience, but also his future potential. He looked at his mana and saw it had increased slightly. Erta asked him what was wrong with him. Did he feel the pleasure of violence? The protagonist replied that she was right. Someday he'd give her a whack too. During this time, he didn't feel the monsters behind him that surrounded him. He grabbed his wooden sword and severed one monster behind him. And he hadn't learned how to fight a group of monsters before. Erta had prompted him to rely on his reflexes. But Ilhan didn't understand how to do that. As he got closer, he swung his sharp sword and chopped the monster into two pieces. The stats immediately showed that he had gotten 700 points and realized that this was what Lita had been telling him about. Angel had asked him to keep his guard up and suggested that the monster was attacking them from above. Ilhan picked up perfect speed and chopped the monster's head off. The stats showed that he had gotten 400 experience points again, but he missed one moment when the monster attacked him from behind with great speed and sealed him to the ground. A sharp claw just stuck into his body, but Erta saw that the guy was so trained that his body had become impenetrable, and to the proboscis of a mosquito. Ilhan immediately stood up after that and ripped the monster in two. Erta saw that the protagonist had surpassed the limits of the human body. As he continued to destroy the monster, he began to gain experience points for himself, and each time he increased his experience. But at the last moment, he was confronted by a dragonfly monster, which swung its sharp legs. But Ilhan dodged its strike, and at that moment a second monster behind him was attacking, which was hit by the dragonfly. Erta shouted that more monsters were approaching. Ilhan looked around and saw that the monsters all surrounded him. It became disgusting for him to even look at them. And taking his sharp swords in his hands, he shouted to call his Sesko to exterminate the bugs. And with great speed, he pounced on the group of monsters and destroyed everything around him. His experience began to increase at a tremendous rate, and his stamina, strength, and mana level increased by one. Suddenly, a bright light suddenly appeared behind him, which made him wary, and it looked like the appearance of another monster. But it turned out to be much better, for behind him appeared a girl who also fights monsters. Ilhan was surprised to see the mage and wondered who she was. Erta asked him not to get distracted and to kill the monsters faster. The mage decided to help the protagonist, and with her lightning-fast attacks, she burned the monsters alive. Erta clued the guy into the fact that she had insane mana stats, and how one could use lightning strikes continuously. Ilhan thought she was just leveling up. After all, his stats were increasing too. Erta looked around and saw that the last one was left. Ilhan saw the last one and immediately chopped it into two pieces. For that, he received 1,250 experience points and reached level 7, and his strength increased by 1, and his stamina and mana by 2. The disciples watched all this and thought it was incredible. Ilhan stopped after the battle and finally dealt with them. But then the warriors came up and apologized and said that the car couldn't make it up the mountain. But after looking around, they were shocked to see that not a single monster was left alive. They had been reported earlier that dozens and even hundreds of insect-like monsters had appeared. And what had happened here in the first place? Ilhan started poking around inside the monsters and thought that maybe they had the Stone of 4 Souls lurking inside. Erta was also surprised that he could strip and a mana stone could be found inside the body. And it's in the hardest part of the skeleton. That's where mana accumulates. And she will show him the place. Ilhan proceeded to strip the capsule, and the status rose to the maximum level. The military wondered what level this guy was, and they're shocked by what they see, and they don't even realize how strong he is. The mage looked at him with her huge eyes and admired his actions. Ilhan found the stone and asked, "Is this it?" Erta replied that it was right and let him take it. It is the basic material for all items. But suddenly, raising his head, Ilhan was surprised at being surrounded by the rest of the students, and he didn't even feel that they had gathered. The mage came up to him and told him that no one would recognize him, and not to worry. Ilhan realized that he had never been paid attention to by such a crowd, so she too decided to learn how to strip and asked him to help her. And this was his first meeting with the Empress. But Ilhan thought about it and decided to check with her. How much would he get? The Empress answered that 40%. Ilhan heard such stakes immediately rejoiced and shook hands. The protagonist himself was the first to approach the monster and showed her how to do it. The students were shocked to see the Empress. How she became so strong in just one day, and it's unbelievable. But they asked them not to get too close, or they might get struck by lightning. But that's what someone wanted. Ilhan heard during the butchering that it was the same girl from the rumors, and she is strong. But people started to wonder, who is this guy? Beams were shooting out of his palms, and people remembered that he had killed that monster with a lightsaber. Ilhan wanted one for himself too, but some people thought it was an axe. Ilhan thought it was a spear. Erta thought it was a good stealth skill, and it was enough of a mask that no one could remember what he was doing here. Ilhan felt a little sad at this point, so he continued to strip the monster and got to the stone. The protagonist took the stone and handed it to the girl. The Empress took it in her hands and thanked the guy for his help. Ilhan dispersed a little and decided to leave, but the warriors stopped him because they needed to ask him something. They asked him to introduce himself, but before he could say anything, the Empress just struck him with a bolt of lightning. The Empress turned to the lieutenant. The lieutenant immediately realized that he had let a lot of things happen. The people were shocked and thought she did it so they wouldn't look any closer, and now they too wanted a discharge from the Empress. Ilhan turned to her too and told her that it was time for them to leave before more chaos started here. But the Empress replied that he had nothing to worry about. People suddenly started asking where the masked guy had gone. Ilhan didn't realize that they couldn't see him anymore, so he waved his arms at them, shouting that he was right next to them. People thought he ran away at the speed of light, and there's so much talent in their group. He's just like Usain Bolt. Erta suddenly asked him if she had told him there was nothing to worry about. Ilhan started crying and thought it was weird. And he thinks it's good, but for some reason he feels sad at heart. Erta asked him to ignore it, but it was important to the protagonist. In the evening, Ilhan went to a secluded place and laid out all his caught things. Erta watched everything and asked him what he wanted to do. Ilhan replied that he wished to craft some armor. A full set is a bit difficult to make, and he hopes to get at least arm and leg protection. Angel told him that dealing with monster materials is incredibly difficult. It's better to wait for a chance to meet a real master, and he could ask him to do something about it. The protagonist decided to ask her, what is she talking about? After all, the best master is standing in front of her. Erta immediately remembered Lita asking her to show some pity, and he doesn't know how to do anything. She covered her face with her hands and said Lita's name. Ilhan heard it and replied that he missed her too. Erta replied that she even missed her very much. But in her head, she thought she was a fraud. And how could anyone cheat her like that? And in a way, he looks like a cheater. Suddenly, she decided to ask him if he knew anything about mana crafting. The protagonist replied that it was the first time he had heard. Erta laughed and remembered that he didn't even have mana after all. Ilhan grabbed her and decided to find out what it was. And was it really a new skill? And started asking her to teach it to him. Erta got angry and asked him to keep his hands off her and take his time, and she would teach him before he let her go. Ilhan apologized and replied that it turned out to be an accident. Erta blushed a second and wasn't used to him yet. She made up her mind and told him that mana crafting uses up mana crystals, similar to mana stones, and to create items like weapons or armor that contain special powers. This craft evolved from blacksmithing. Ilhan, hearing about this, began to shout and beg her to teach him. Erta pushed him and said she would teach him, and he should remember to say a few words to Lita when he was in heaven. Ilhan was surprised and asked what about. Erta replied that it was about her having to watch out for her man on her own. She proceeded to tell him that before starting to craft armor, you need to prepare materials and magic stones, or mana crystals with special properties. Ilhan decided to clarify. What kind of properties? Angel gave him an example in the shape of a dragon's heart. Hearing one word about a dragon's heart, Ilhan started to glow, and it sounded cool to him. She informed him that he should first place the magical stone next to him, synchronize, and begin the forging process. And after he finishes the piece, he will pulverize the stone and apply it to the surface. He will then have a basic shape. This is where his work will end. The attack of this shield is 30 points and the defense is 50. Ilhan asked, is that the end of it? Angel replied that this base form just increases the stats. But there is another crafting that can give new skills, and that is the advanced form. But that's a little more complicated. With his amount of mana, he can't do that yet. Ilhan suddenly decided and shared with her that he would tell her anyway, and she wouldn't know until she tried it. Erta had also suggested to him that in order to add abilities to the item, the craftsman had to put mana into the magic stone. And it won't work if the mana runs out quickly. If he invested it into magic stones properly, he could create a dream weapon. It could spew ice or flames or regenerate stamina when he reflects attacks. And when choosing an ability, the will of the wizard is important, and one must not forget the amount of mana and the quality of the magic stones. Ilhan realized that he needed a strong will to get what he wanted, and one must try. The protagonist started cutting and saw that he had very dexterous hands, and giving a little more ability to develop created a body defense for himself. Erta saw this and said he could do it even without skills, and the system showed that he had learned mana crafting. Ilan replied that he knew the theory perfectly, and that left the practice, and decided he would have been better off keeping silent. It would have looked cooler. But Erta thought and saw that he was right. He understood the concept so quickly, and he has a talent for adaptation. And if he understood everything else so quickly too, he could gain incredible power. Erta told the guy that he had already created protective armor. But what was he going to do with the others? Elin asked her just to watch, and revealed that he wasn't done yet. He had some magic stone left. He closed his eyes and decided to use the mana of the stone. Erta was shocked because she realized that he was going to make an advanced form right away. And he doesn't even know how to control mana. It's useless to him. Ilan suddenly saw a bright white light in his hand, and it even blinded him in his eyes. He saw with the corner of his eye that he had gotten something like a mantis scythe. Erta felt that it was impossible for him to fail when he had gotten this far, but Ilhan still held the small stone in his hands. So Angel felt a little bad and decided to add a drop of her mana. Ilan came to his senses after this and was a bit shocked. The bright light just penetrated his soles and blinded his eyes, and Erta thought he had failed. Seeing the huge exhibit in front of him, Ilhan rejoiced because he had succeeded. He put the armor on his arm, and the status immediately showed that his mana craft had reached level 2. Ilan decided to put it to the test, and with a wave of his hand, he cut the iron chain into 2 pieces. The protagonist rejoiced, for this was exactly what he wanted. And Erta now realized that he wanted to add the mantis skill to the wristbands. And now Ilhan realized that he had to hurry. Angel replied that was correct. She helped him a little with mana, but probably that he created such an item on the first try. And she sees that the protagonist needs to raise his mana and make new items. But Ilhan replied that's not what he was talking about. He suddenly started running away and yelling that he broke the swing and needs to get out of here quickly. She asked him to stop, for she was using restorative magic. That same night, the news portal was already buzzing, and the government was looking for citizens who had defeated the monsters. 2 students from Sion University quickly destroyed them and disappeared without a trace. In the morning, Ilhan saw this news and headed to his studies. His mother was worried about her son and asked him to stay home today. But the news had already said that the government has labeled people with extraordinary abilities as superpowered ability users, and it is assumed that their mana proficiency is also high. She looked at the main character's mother and saw that she had a mommy skill, and maternal instinct in which gets a 10 bonus. The mother said that it's dangerous outside. There are many monsters out there. Ilhan noticed immediately that his mother's attentiveness was now so strong that he couldn't do anything quietly in his room at all. He asked her not to worry, and if he saw a monster, he would run away immediately. Meanwhile, the news said that the government was planning to create a unit of advanced mana users. It would be headed by people with superpowered abilities. But the mother still asked her son to be careful. Ilhan replied that he had already said he could. She, on the other hand, had better not go anywhere. As he walked outside, he realized that he had barely made it out of his mother's arms. And he can't believe his mom has developed such a skill. But he doesn't know what it's even for. Erta replied that it's probably for keeping track of her son, but Ilhan didn't understand. What good would that do? Erta replied that they say that even in a large group of penguins, a penguin can easily hear her chick crying. It's the same here, a useful skill for survival. Ilhan immediately imagined how in a crowd his mother would be yelling his name and worrying about him, and he would feel very ashamed. Suddenly, Erta saw the look on the boy's face and asked what was wrong. Ilhan replied that it would be a shock to him if his mother stopped noticing, and considering that even God didn't notice. Erta disagreed with him and asked him to calm down. But she wondered what the boy thought of the news. About the government squad of their strong fighters. Ilhan immediately replied that he wasn't interested in that. He doesn't want to work for the government. For him, he and his family come first. And Erta thought it was easier to act alone. No need for unnecessary restrictions, and the protagonist agreed with her. But what he really wanted was to meet the Empress again. Erta asked him if he was already in love, but the guy replied, "That's not the point. Since the beginning of the disaster, he's not interested in such things at all." And such thoughts went through Erta's mind that the protagonist is just impotent. But Ilhan immediately began to deny and asked her to stop making up nonsense. But she said that there are cases when libido drops after too intense physical training. Ilhan got so angry with her that he started shouting at the top of his voice that he was not impotent. But the humans didn't even notice or see him. And Erta explained to him that even if you yell in the middle of the street impotent, no one would notice because of the ability. But Ilhan at that moment didn't even know if it was a blessing or a curse. So he shared with her that he had an idea why this happened. Erta wondered why too. He thought hard and answered that it was because of Lita. Erta told him that he had spent 1,000 years just admiring angelic beauty and had lost interest in ordinary women. It's just called impotent. Ilan didn't like this and asked her to stop saying such words. But the protagonist was interested in how the Empress had learned to control mana so well. He had already leveled up, but he didn't understand how to use it. But the Empress's abilities are astounding. "There's nothing surprising about that," replied Erta. "That's why the gods sent people to another world to train. And in terms of uniqueness, Ilhan, who can destroy monsters with his bare hands." And then she realized everything she had seen before her eyes for days. Elin asked her what was wrong. She replied that she could feel the presence of monsters nearby, a pack of 70 wolves and wild dogs, led by a level 35 diamond wolf. Elin was shocked that a level 35 and 70 monsters were coming at them, and started yelling at her, for she had said there would be no high-ranked monsters for now. Erta replied that she noticed the weirdness as early as yesterday, and she wasn't sure why on the second day after the disaster, hordes of level 10 monsters had already appeared. Ilan was shocked because she hadn't said anything yesterday. The angel had shut that conversation down by saying that she didn't want to share her experiences with an inferior creature. Ilhan had also noticed that Erta was indeed very different from Lita. It's like she's an arrogant rich girl, always drawing a line between the higher and the lower. And Lita seems a little silly sometimes, but kind, like an older sister. And he feels perfectly fine about missing her. Erta decided to draw his attention to herself and said she would be honest. Ilan immediately began to look at her carefully and listen to her. But Erta said that the earth is not okay, and she needed his help. Ilhan wondered what had happened, but Erta started shouting that he should hurry and would explain on the way. The protagonist realized that something bad had happened and asked that she show him the way to those monsters. The plot stated that a god teleported people because of an impending disaster to another world, and this place was where they could learn how to use mana, but the animals stayed here. The god thought that nothing would happen to them in 10 years. However, due to an as-yet unknown error, the flow of time on Earth was greatly distorted. 10 years in other worlds turned into 1,000 years on Earth, and for thousands of years, Lita was always with him. And so he didn't even notice how much time had passed. Erta now took control and guided the protagonist with the help of his hair. Elin only cried out in pain that he wouldn't have any hair left like that. But even considering the catastrophe, the animals had lived 1,000 years instead of the usual time frame. And change was inevitable. And as a result, right now, Earth's monsters are much stronger than those on other worlds. Ilhan saw them and froze in place, and only said that the Earth was doomed. That's why Erta is asking for his help. The heavens are trying to restore balance. And until that happens, they are responsible for exterminating the monsters. Naturally, everything would be compensated according to merit. Ilhan immediately changed his clothes and informed her that it was a very problematic assignment. Erta assessed the pros and cons and replied that it was hard to argue with that. Ilhan didn't wait long and immediately set out with his spear to destroy them. But it seemed even better this way to him. He unleashed a crushing blow from the sky that even the monsters jumped into the air. Some fell right under the blow and immediately ended their lives. The stats showed that he received 12,000 experience for such a thing, and a level 35 brown diamond wolf record was obtained. And then he reached level 9, and strength increased by 4, agility and mana health by 2. Erta suddenly asked him, is he really a masochist? Ilan turned around and replied that he wasn't, but she actually wanted to praise him first. The monsters became even angrier when they saw their allies dead, and attacked him from behind with ferocious teeth. The protagonist sensed their presence and turned around and attacked them with his mana. He saw his status and thought it was a cool title, even though it was just a regular mongrel. But people were on the street at this time, and saw the monsters and asked for help. Some warriors tried to fight them, but their attacks against level 35 wolves didn't work. A warrior felt that his mana was not enough and asked for help too. Ilhan saw this and headed in their direction and immediately started to defend his fellow countrymen. With his ferocious attacks, he reached the warrior who was in danger, and the warrior was ready to say goodbye to his life. He closed his eyes and was surprised that he was still alive, for at that moment a masked man was standing in front of him. Ilan decided to ask him if he was hurt. People saw a familiar face and started shouting that it was the guy from the incident near the university, and they called him the instantly disappearing Sunbolt. Ilan was surprised that they recognized him, and didn't realize what kind of loser nickname they had given him. Erta replied that he just got some fans, and she congratulated him. But Ilhan didn't like that and asked her to shut her mouth, and immediately set about destroying the monsters. He didn't understand who the fans were, and what kind of nonsense she was talking about, and he didn't really need that kind of stuff. After destroying a few more monsters, he froze in place and didn't understand one thing: why his level wasn't increasing. But he noticed that the status showed him that he had to choose a class to advance to the next level. But suddenly, one of the wolves howled at the top of its voice. Ilhan immediately covered his ears and didn't realize what was happening. Immediately, several ferocious wolves appeared in front of them, ready to shred him to pieces. He wondered where they came from. Erta replied that it was some kind of order, and it was worth being careful. The protagonist noticed that they were smart, and now if he retreats, he will lose the initiative. And if he defended himself, they would bite him. In that case, he realized that he should attack first, and immediately swung his spear and destroyed several monsters. Immediately after that, he received a few experiences, but he didn't stop there and continued to gain points. Destroying every monster that was heading in his direction, he tried to finish them off with ease. People were shocked that it was unbelievable. The warrior took out 5 in front of him in an instant. But suddenly one wolf was behind the humans, looking at them like food. But there was already one man lying under its huge paw. Ilhan saw that this wolf had taken a hostage. Erta agreed, and it seemed to her that it was not the first time he did such a thing. But the protagonist got even more excited and realized that it still didn't change anything, and took a stand for his attack. Ilan knew he had to help the guy, but the thought of him getting hurt mattered too. People considered it as news, and including all the phones started filming and wondering what Sunbolt would do. Erta notified him that his decision would determine whether he would become everyone's hero or villain. Ilan thought, what kind of hero and villain? He really doesn't care about such things at all, and immediately began his attacks. After cutting off the wolf's head, the hostage relaxed a bit and could already move. The stats showed immediately that he had gained 6,000 experience and obtained the record of a large cunning wolf of level 32. The protagonist acted on this status. If a person was in trouble, he could save them, but only if he can. But he's not a hero, he's actually an ordinary guy, Erta wondered. What kind of speech was that? The protagonist didn't dwell on it and asked her to let her say something cool for once. Erta suddenly saw that the wolves had noticed that he had lost his weapon and so would attack. Ilan stretched a bit and called them arrogant puppies and notified them that they shouldn't think he could only fight with a spear. Picking the perfect moment, Ilhan just waved his hand and smashed into the monster's jaw with tremendous force that the wolf even lost himself. And now he would show them the result of his training with the Battle Queen. Ilhan adopted a fighter's stance and shouted to the monsters to come over. Erta realized that Ilhan is not going to sacrifice himself to save others, and makes decisions more calmly and quickly than the others to show as much efficiency as possible. And now she realizes that Lita has raised an awesome monster. But suddenly she thought about it and saw that this was not something that could be learned, only the result of his own efforts. People were shocked at the main character's strength and realized that even his body was a weapon. After a couple minutes, Ilhan was left alone on the battlefield and asked if that was it. But suddenly, in a moment, everything changed and a weapon was pointed at the back of his head, and he was told to stand still and not move. Ilhan turned around and saw that he was now surrounded by military men. People immediately started to get indignant and asked what were they doing. He had defeated all the monsters and even saved a hostage. And why are they keeping him at gunpoint? Suddenly, one of the military men marveled at the fact that this guy had defeated everyone. But how did he do it? The military woman went up to him and apologized for what happened, and don't misunderstand them. They weren't really going to shoot. They were just worried because there must have been a lot of monsters around. But it all ended well. And if he knows, there's a whole army unit looking for him, and they were going to ask. But suddenly a military man came up to him and turned to the lieutenant and notified her that no one could hear her. The lieutenant was surprised because he disappeared again, and he is running away too fast. Ilan walked over to the dead wolf and stuck his spear in it and realized he needed to make a carving knife. But first he would find a place to do such a thing. The lieutenant was still yelling and asking if Sunbolt was here, but Ilhan started to deny it and said no. The military woman asked him if he had any grudges against the army or the country. The protagonist replied that he had none, but the military lady immediately offered him to work together. Ilhan again refused her, but the military woman was curious as to why he refused. The protagonist replied that it was because he would be pestered with questions and tasks if he agreed to it. Erta also agreed with him, but Ilhanu thought she was reading his mind again. But Angel replied that he has it all written on his face. And even when he is wearing a mask, the boy asked. Erta replied that the thoughts of inferior beings mean nothing to her, and it's best not to cooperate with the army or the government. Even all together, they are not as good as him alone, and it's more beneficial to be on his own. But Ilhan realized that it would be a bit difficult to carry all this alone. After that, the military woman started saying that she wasn't being listened to because of her military uniform, at least even if she quits. At this moment, the marshal stood next to the main and looked in front of her with surprised eyes. She turned around and asked the hero if he wanted to work with them, but Ilhan offered them to buy the bodies of these dogs from him, and he would help them with the cutting. He realized that it was more profitable to sell them than to carry them home. The lieutenant was surprised to hear about the butchering, but the military officer informed her that the monster bodies were very valuable. She didn't hesitate long and immediately agreed to buy them, but even remembered and decided to clarify about the mana stones. But Ilhan immediately refused her. The lieutenant began to examine the dogs and analyzed that the skin and bones are almost intact. That was because he had killed them with a single blow. The gunshot deteriorated the materials, making them unusable, and he cuts like a god, with such precision and speed, separating hide, bone, and flesh. The lieutenant started filming it and wanted to learn for herself. Immediately afterward, she called her men and asked them to watch the video she sent them, and Sunbolt's skill just amazes her. But the people on the phone immediately asked her to have them bring it to them immediately. The lieutenant replied that the hero said he was not interested, but the people asked her to be seduced by looks or something. She suddenly wondered what kind of looks the main man was talking about. But the warrior next to her was also saying that it was impossible, and not even worth trying. Ilhan, meanwhile, finished everything and notified them, and asked to receive the money only in cash. The lieutenant agreed and would report to her superiors. Ilhan, meanwhile, relaxed and headed home. He was glad he had stocked up on mana stones, and it looked delicious, just like chocolate. But Erta had informed him in advance that he shouldn't eat them. He'll go into a rage, or he wants to be consumed by the monster's mana. But really, that would end badly. Ilhan immediately felt a premonition who something would definitely eat them and turn into a monster. The next day, the lieutenant came to the meeting and provided him with 37 million in cash, and he could count it. Erta looked too and saw that they didn't scrimp, and didn't seem to want to ruin their relationship with him. So the lieutenant decided to hit on him and told him that she's wearing a uniform now, but used to be quite popular. The protagonist was not interested in this and immediately refused her. But the lieutenant didn't agree to give up like that and asked him to stop. She immediately started the call button for everyone to surround him. But the bright light blinded her eyes and she didn't realize where he had disappeared to. They didn't even know what his level was. Erta decided to ask him if he had distracted them to make the stealth skill work again. Ilhan put on his mask and headed home, for Heaven would soon begin his investigation, and it's going to take some sweating before then. And Erta is also sure that new dangerous monsters may appear, and the lieutenant chastises herself that her seduction didn't work, and she's embarrassed by it. The warriors answered her that they were trying to stop her. The lieutenant was very angry with him and was looking for Sunbolt. But Ilhan actually realized that his long day was just beginning and needed to be on his guard. Going to a secluded place, Ilhan opened the status and decided that he now needed to choose his first class. He opened the classes and saw that the class names were exactly like from some role-playing game. And the assassin class would be put aside for now, and he had enough stealth for now. But Erta notified him that since he can't control his aura right now, he can't control his stealth skill. He has it on all the time, so he doesn't need mana for it. Ilhan replied that he now understood the stealth skill, and he needs to learn how to control his mana as soon as possible. And it's a bit hard for him to choose among 23, and asked Erta if she could recommend something. Erta was surprised that he had 23 classes a couple days after getting into the Akasha Chronicles. And if they had a little more time, there would be 30 or even 40 choices available. And after thinking about it, answered that she would recommend a spearman, since he uses a spear, or a grappler would be good too, since he knows how to wield a spear and fight in hand-to-hand combat. Ilhan also remembered that he started practicing them too, since Lita recommended it to him. Every day she praised him and said that now he lasted a full 3 minutes against her. That's a new record for him. He was actually training while receiving blows from Lita. Erta told him that being trained by Angel was an incredibly rare opportunity, and he was just lucky. But Ilhan realized that if he was lucky, he wouldn't have been left alone on Earth. Erta had answered him that there was nothing he could do. It was his destiny. But Erta told him that there was no need to worry about it. When his level increased later, he would be able to get a second and then a third subclass. Ilhan was surprised and asked, "What's second class? Isn't that a class change?" He couldn't even find anything on the internet about subclasses. Erta answered him that social media is just a waste of his life. He wouldn't find anything useful on the internet. Ilhan decided to ask her if she had a bad experience with the internet. Erta replied that she had the right not to talk about it, and something must have happened. Ilhan chose his class and decided that a spearman would be the best fit for him. Erta decided to find out for what reason. The protagonist replied that the variation of the power of destruction depends a lot on the weapon. Therefore, having a weapon is better than being a grappler. Erta saw that he had a knack for reasoning. If she could find good materials later, she could create much better spears. She thought about recommending a grappler, but Ilhan made the decision on his own, but definitely will gradually become stronger and stronger. Suddenly something changed in his status, and he was surprised. Erta asked, "What is it?" Ilhan got angry and replied that suddenly a new choice had suddenly appeared abruptly. It says Bloody Spearman. Erta realized it was a modification, and it's a unique profession. Who would have thought that he would get a unique profession from the first class? Ilhan was surprised by the unique profession and didn't understand what it was. She replied that it is a class created specifically for one person. His path traveled, his accomplishments, and the records he has obtained are combined to create an entirely new class, and he should choose it unconditionally. Since the unique profession was specially created for him, it is the best. And compared to other professions, it requires more experience to level up, but even so, it is very valuable. Ilhan chose his class. The stats showed that he had become a blurred spearman, but suddenly a notification came out that he couldn't control mana, and he couldn't learn the active skill. And now he realized that he wasn't a blood lanceman, but a hazy lanceman. Ilhan got angry and wondered what the hell it was. Erta thought there was a bloody one there too, but Ilhan, if he knew what it was, he wouldn't have picked it. Erta said she couldn't refute the fact that the word was incredibly fitting for him, but suddenly a miracle happened and the main character started to evolve and gained a huge body mass. Ilhan said that his body had changed. Erta replied that he got first class. His body became stronger. He has already made a choice, so he won't be able to turn back. Ilhan couldn't believe that he had changed, but was saddened when he saw that his title hadn't changed. Erta asked the guy if he had gotten an active skill. The guy replied that he hadn't, but she informed him that most people with first class didn't get it, so no need to worry. But looking at his speed of development, she doubts that he will get mana even when he becomes a second class holder. The protagonist asked, "Isn't that dangerous?" Angel replied that it is dangerous, if he was an ordinary human. Hearing such words, he even calmed down, but Angel said that he had nothing to worry about if he couldn't get the skill the first sophomore year, and his records would add up, and after he got the third class, he would get a strong skill. Ilhan reasoned that instead of getting several normal skills, he would get one, but a strong one. She immediately confirmed his words. She thought that Ilhan should have originally gotten 2 active skills since he had gotten a unique profession. However, that didn't happen. And if all the difficult records were collected before obtaining the third class, then he would receive a fantastic skill. Ilhan was simply an inferior creature worthy of observation. Erta immediately took him by the hair and asked him to go. But he asked where should they go. Erta replied that she had hidden his suitcase of money with magic, so no one would take it away. Now, as an agent, he should start looking for monsters. She was still pulling his hair and telling him to go, but Ilhan replied that he understood everything and asked her to stop pulling her hair. But Erta told that there are many other agents besides him. Therefore, it is not a good idea to do everything alone. Hunt monsters within his reach. Ilhan was curious and didn't know if the Empress had become an agent too. Erta replied that she had. Such a talent, a person can't stay away. And this is an assignment from heaven. If he achieves more than the other agents, his rewards will increase, and one must try hard. Ilhan replied that this kind of assignment is something he likes. If there was a condition to help people, he wouldn't be excited about it. And it is good that it is said that he will be rewarded according to his efforts. God and the angels are pretty cool. Erta suddenly asked him to watch where he was going, because it showed up. Looking at his phone, he saw an informational message about the hunt. People were already in shock and didn't know what it was. There was a huge bear coming at them. People started to run away and realized that they would not kill it. Meanwhile, Ilhan got excited and considered the monster as his stepping stone up. And it looked like he would be able to eat the bear's gallbladder today. Erta replied that he could if he had the poison resistance skill. And did he really have a problem with that? But if the opportunity arose, he should learn that skill. Ilhan replied that there was no problem. But suddenly the ground began to shake, and all the structures of the houses began to collapse. Ilhan didn't understand what was happening and thought that the military had launched missiles. Erta was more attentive than him and asked him to look away. The bear was massively huge and was collapsing everything in front of him. And the military surrounded him and were ready to fire all the bullets at him. The military surrounded the bear and fired all the bullets. But the bear's skin was so hard that the bullets just flew off to the side. The soldiers realized it was useless. And how could they fight such a monster on the third day after the great cataclysm? The military man saw that the bear started to change direction and asked the others to spread out, and were the users of the abilities the government requested. Erta assessed and told the hero that their buildings are fragile. They would break from the rampage of a monster of only second class. Ilhan asked her to be more understanding. While people were training in another world, all the buildings, facilities, property, weapons, and technology existed before the current situation. In this world, there was only the knowledge and experience of ordinary people, and no one will stop him, and he thinks the bear just meant it. Ilhan put on his mask and saw that the bear was having a lot of fun, and Erta also thinks that the expression big fish in a small pond can be applied here. She wondered what he was going to do, and he had better not delay any longer. Ilhan clenched his weapon and replied that he had time, and applied his stealth skill. The stats immediately showed that because of stealth, his strength was increased by 10%. And because of wielding the spear, his strength increased. He realized that the perfect time for stealth was when he struck first. But the bear suddenly raised its head and opened its huge mouth with sharp teeth. Erta shouted to him that the bear should not notice him before attacking, and let him check into his ability to hide even from a god. The protagonist was shocked that the angel started scolding him, and realized that his main priority right now was the bear. He launched his spear attack and hit right on target. The warriors only saw the impact and realized that Sunbolt had come. Ilhan realized that this nickname had stuck with him, and it looks like he won't be able to kill it with that punch. And it's a Class 2 monster. Ilhan decided to notify the others that if they wanted to live, they should run away from here. The warriors realized that they couldn't leave this place, but they could stay if they wanted to. The bear didn't wait long and came down on his four paws and went straight for the civilians. Ilhan attacked him from above, but the bear raised his head and waved his huge paw. But things didn't go according to his plan, and the protagonist dodged and let him know that there was no chance. At the perfect moment, Ilhan raised his spear above his head and thrust it straight at the bear's paw. Erta was on the hero's head at the time and was having a lot of fun, but he informed her that she was riding while sitting on his head. The bear didn't like that, so Erta told the hero that he was back in stealth because the bear had lost him. As long as he can't see him, then there's a chance. Ilhan knew this, and didn't know if the next attack his spear made would stand up to it. But at least his body wasn't different from the day he was left here. But he had managed to accumulate a lot of strength in it through long training and gaining class. In that case, he remembered Lita telling him not to think about extraneous things and concentrated all his weight into one point. Ilhan decided to ask, what if someone gets hurt? Lita replied that he would only think about it when he touched a single hair from her head. The protagonist asked her, who does she think he is? If she fought against him, he would be worried that he would hurt himself. Lita picked the perfect moment and punched him right in the head. Ilhan lay on the ground and realized it. And now Lita realized what he meant. But Ilhan still made it through. He had just concentrated all his weight into one point, just like she had said. And with his punch, he chose her hair. Ilhan seeing that made him very happy. And now he remembered that there was one time when he managed to touch Lita, and now he would put all his strength into one point. He saw the perfect moment and put all the power of the spear on it and made a huge cut. The bear felt a strong blow right to his head, and he was very angry. People immediately noticed that the bear had stopped. And is he really dead, they thought. The stats immediately showed that the protagonist had gotten experience points, and a level 54 big brown bear record was received. Erta notified him that he finished in 3 hits and without any skills. But Ilhan asked her to give him better praise and made sure his spear was still holding, and that pleased him. Next, he was glad that it was time for the cutting, but he saw that the bear had just shrunk. And apparently it had the skill of gigantism, and when he died, he was gone. And if you think about it, he just got the critical strike skill. Erta said it's not bad. It goes well with his stealth skill. All records of his actions, accomplishments, contacts with anyone have a great impact on the formation and growth of his skills, and let him accomplish great things and learn skills. But suddenly a car pulled up to them, and a door opened, and a voice said that they had arrived, and would take care of everything here. But they became interested in the monster itself. Erta said that it looked like other ability users had come here, and Ilhan sensed immediately the extroversion already in their voices, but it was already over. People asked the military who had already killed the monster. It couldn't be that they were too late. One of the arrivals said that he had once heard that it was a Class 2 monster, but it was so boring, and he was hoping to stretch out a bit. Suddenly, the elder looked to the side and saw the mask. Ilhan realized that this guy had spotted him, but Erta told him that to be more precise, it wasn't him he was looking out for, but the corpse of a bear, and he had noticed him since he was near it. The elder came over and said that it was Sunbolt, and his ally confirmed it too. But one of his group didn't believe that the guy single-handedly slew the bear. And it couldn't be. How could it be possible on the 3rd day of the Great Cataclysm? They surrounded him and started asking him if he had gotten second class. And by chance, he had not found the dungeon. But Ilhan tried to ignore them and prayed that they would get lost and realized that the basis of the introvert mindset was not talking to others. One of the new arrivals got angry and asked him in a rude way to respond when spoken to. And the older man calmed him down and informed him that the protagonist does not want to talk to them, and it was better to leave him alone. But the boy asked what was wrong with him. The girl suddenly replied that it's even cooler. He's like a samurai foodie. The guy with blue hair thought she had specific interests. At that moment, Senior was talking to the military and realized that there were no jobs for them here. So he asked the servicemen if they needed any help. The military man replied that help was needed in other areas, and they could help them there. The senior agreed because that was their job. Ilhan noticed at that moment that this guy was freely talking to people he just met, and he probably has an active social life, and if it was him, he would have failed already at the moment of greeting. This guy approached Sunbolt and let him know that he was happy to meet him, and introduced himself as Du Wujun. The protagonist saw that he's now extending his hand, and doesn't understand why. Du shared that when he saw him take down this bear, he realized that he would have gotten behind him during his first mission. But he would definitely overtake him before long, and he'd better remember the name. Ilhan decided to ask him what he was going to do after he overtook him. Du answered that in a world where strength is denoted by level, it is easy to distinguish the strongest, and one day he would be above anyone. Ilhan thought that was just a petty reason. What, does he want to become someone like the main character of the seinen manhwa? Ilhan found out from him why he needed a rival. After all, he can't get better unless there's another person he can compare to. And what does he want to accomplish by setting out to break another man? What he lacks is drive. And if he wants to develop his abilities, he just needs to work hard alone. Whether it's studying alone at home or training with a punching bag or whatever. But why does he want to get another person involved? But if he wants to overcome something, he has to overcome himself first. And he could not do that and thought it would be better to compare himself with others. He has labored for 1,000 years, but he still cannot gain self-confidence. and he neglects it, and speaks loudly that he will become the strongest. But really, it's just ridiculous. But suddenly Erta asked him why he was upset. After all, they had already left. Ilan asks her, "What is she saying?" He is incredibly calm. But Angel told him that introverts can't be eloquent in a conversation with an extrovert. He would only sweat with excitement. After the work done, Ilan saw that he didn't find any magic stones. But the hide is quite useful. Suddenly, a military man came up to him and addressed him. But Ilhan immediately answered him that he would not sell it. But the military man didn't approach him for that. He wanted to make him an offer. The military man told him everything, and if Sunbolt installed the app he told him about, he would be able to track the location of the monsters that appeared on the map. It would help a lot in his hunt. Ilhan suddenly asked, "Wasn't this classified as a state secret? Can he tell about it?" The military man replied that it was for the safety of the citizens. They hope it will at least reduce the damage caused by the dangerous monsters by a little bit. The protagonist thought for a moment, and without giving them an answer, he went about his business. The military officer asked the major if he was sure he could just let him go. He must force him to cooperate with them, using any means of coercion. The major called him a moron and asked if he seriously thought that an ability user who destroyed a Class 2 monster in 3 hits would obey their orders. He had personally seen an outstanding ability user in another world single-handedly leading his state, and how a monster had single-handedly smashed that country to pieces. And from here on out, Sunbolt will grow even stronger. If they try to forcibly restrict him, it will only bring them down. This world no longer obeys the old rules. It is now a world where both the government and the army can collapse just because of one person. And that's why there's no need to over-control a huge Mila. It will be more reasonable to coexist, benefiting each other. The military man was surprised and told the major that he just looked incredibly smart. But the major called him a moron, and he doesn't look smart, he is. He was educated in soul. Erta heard everything too and told him that that military man is smart. He will live a long life. Ilhan replied that he doesn't know and thinks the major overestimates him a lot. But Erta thinks the opposite, that the guy underestimates himself. If the army forced Ilhan to cooperate with them against his will, he would have destroyed the entire military unit just to avoid following their orders. Right now, the military has no control over Ilhan. That soldier quickly realized this and offered cooperation instead of coercion. He stayed on good terms with him, finding a way to communicate. And it seems the guy had not yet realized how powerful and valuable he was, and suddenly Ilhan notified her that 3 monsters appeared at the same time. And he doesn't know what he should do. Erta asked him, why the hesitation? They could destroy all 3 of them. Ilhan liked that even more, and decided to do it. After destroying all 3 monsters, he didn't realize he was still on 24, and why he only went up to the first level. Erta replied that those monsters were weaker than the dreaded wolf and brown bear, and his unique profession requires a lot of experience. If he was an ordinary person, he would have at least level 30 right now. And at what point could that blurry face be powerful? But at least he had gotten a lot of items that he was selling to the army interested in them. Ilhan rejoiced, for now he had 1 billion in cash. With that kind of money, he could do whatever he wanted. And maybe he should look into real estate, the boy thought. Erta replied that it was unwise to dispose of a lot of money like that. What would he do if he was tracked down? That kind of spending is the same as shouting all over the neighborhood that Sunbolt is you, Ilhan. And so just this once, as a special bonus, she'll erase the memories of the people involved in this case. And just like that, it would end like that. Ilhan marveled and started saying loudly that Angel's magic is the best in the world. Erta cheered and asked him for more praise. The next morning, the next day, Ilhan sat in his room and watched his status. But suddenly he was shocked and didn't know what it meant. After all, the status showed that the connection to the other world had been restored. And from now on, he could physically appear in the other world he had been summoned to and perform tasks for appropriate rewards. Ilhan realized that the world he had been summoned to was getting, he would be alone again. He pointed the status at the angel and asked, "What the hell is that?" Erta replied that the monsters on Earth had gotten much stronger. It was necessary to come up with some way to deal with this problem. Elin asked her if they had decided to send people to another world where they could safely gain experience. Angel replied that was correct, but Ilhan was not happy, for he did not know what would happen to him. After all, other people go to the other world. Erta said he had always been alone, so what was different now? Ilan grabbed his head and realized that his mother would definitely ask him why he wasn't going to the other world. Erta prompted him to answer her that there was nothing to learn there, and so there was no point in him going there. Ilan didn't really want to act like a schoolboy. Erta decided to apologize to him that she was sorry about his situation. However, there was nothing she could do about it. She wasn't the one who chose this fate for him. Ilan knew that everything was right and thinks he won't be able to go to the other world in the end. But Erta had informed him that it was not so impossible. If he became a supreme creature, he would have the opportunity to do so. And if he became a supreme creature, he would be able to go not only to the other world, but even to heaven. And he would be on the same level as them, the angels. Ilhan immediately realized that if he became a higher creature, he would be able to see Lita again. Ertha considered that they were like lovers separated by distance. And if that was the case, she was now playing the role of a mediator between them. And now she really disliked it. She advised him that he should train even harder to become a supreme creature. And then he can go to the other world and meet his beloved again. Ilan asked how long it would take. The angel replied that it would have to be less than 1,000 years. Ilan thanked her and told her that he felt much better now. But suddenly some urgent news came through. It said that martial law had been declared throughout the country from today. Ilan was shocked to hear about martial law. His mother replied that it was declared not only in their country, but all over the world. And it seems that because of the monsters, they had no other choice. All schools and businesses have closed. And meanwhile, the army is planning to exterminate all the monsters. And at least people are forbidden to go outside. Ilan was surprised that even the government recognized that it would not be possible to live like before. He suddenly made up his mind and asked his parents to go to another world. They immediately wondered, what was the point? They had been there for 10 years, but they couldn't even reach the second grade. But Ilhan replied that monsters would continue to keep appearing. They needed to get stronger. At the very least, it would be safer there now than on Earth. Suddenly, his father answered him that he understood. Since he felt that way, he would go, and he shouldn't give up trying to rule Mana and work hard. But Mother got angry and asked, "What's the rush? Will he just be able to leave like that?" But the protagonist's father did not resist and immediately disappeared. But the mother told her son that she reasoned a little differently than his father, and she would be happy if he would try hard, but not overwork himself. Ilan wondered how he could overwork himself. Today's soup is so delicious. But suddenly Mother told him directly that he was the hunter in the mask. Ilhan was surprised, and he wondered how she knew. Mother replied that she didn't understand. How could a mother not recognize her own son? And she was so surprised when she saw him on TV. She guessed at one glance that it was him, despite the mask and different clothes. Ilhan at that moment didn't understand. How could she know that? And that was the unique skill of worrying about your child. He dared to speak up and told his mother that he was touched. Both the world and heaven were ignoring him. The mother is suddenly curious. Who is ignoring him? She doesn't know how he became so strong, but she is worried about him. He should be careful and always make sensible decisions, and thinks he realizes how scary monsters are. But humans are much scarier than monsters, and we should not forget that there are a lot more evil people out there, and beware of them all the time. Ilan realizes that even though she is instructing him, he is glad to hear her voice. His mother says she is pleased that he has such a good appetite this morning, and she'll be on her way too, and no need to do anything dangerous. Ilan said goodbye to his mother and asked her to take care of herself. But seeing the pile of dishes, he remembered that Lita always washed the dishes. Meanwhile, his parents went to another world to gain experience. Though he can't go there, but he has other things to do. Suddenly, Erta told the guy that she would go to heaven for a while to collect the reward for the task. Ilan listened and asked her if she could grab some ice cream on the way back. Erta was saddened to hear about the ice cream. Ilan said goodbye to her and remembered that last night he had bought a storage unit with cash, and this is where his workshop will be. But he didn't have the tools and equipment yet, but without processing, the leather and bones would deteriorate quickly. He actually wanted to use metal, but since he doesn't have the materials, it should be enough to process the bones. However, it seems to take too long to process and harden the leather. At this rate, he doesn't know when he will be able to complete the equipment. But suddenly, Erta came and notified him that he could manage with magic. Ilhan was surprised that she came back so quickly and asked her if she had bought ice cream, but was shocked at what she saw, for Erta had turned into a girl with angel wings. Ilhan asked her, can she use the magic of gigantism too? Erta wondered who he thought she was. She had been using miniaturization magic all this time, but it was worth forgetting that. Let him hold out his hand and she would give him the reward. Elon was surprised and held out his hand to her, but felt that her hand was cold but gentle. Suddenly, the status showed that the task 001 given by Heaven was completed. He was surprised that his stats changed immediately. After receiving the eternal flame, he wondered what it was. Erta smiled and asked him to look away. Ilhan was shocked and didn't realize when a fire was lit in the fireplace. After all, he hadn't lit it. Erta told him that the eternal flame is a living flame that never dies out and is constantly growing. It is the prized flame of heaven. Ilhan rejoiced that he had gotten a never-fading living flame, and it was just what he needed. Erta knew that too, especially Lita had insisted on it. The main character was surprised to hear about Lita, but she realized that in heaven, Lita was overly worried about her. Ilan couldn't believe that Lita did this, and she really understands what he needs. But Erta notified him that he also had some good news for him. Heaven has given him a second assignment since he can't move to another world. The boy asked what other assignment. The angel replied that from now on he would be creating dungeons on Earth. Ilan was shocked and strange thoughts filled his head. He didn't understand how he would be able to do this, and why. He picked up the frying pan and said, "Dungeon sounds fun," but he apologizes and doesn't think he can do it. He does, however, know how to brew ramen. Erta was upset and decided to find out what all the nonsense was about. It's actually a decree from heaven. He has been given a task, and he is to help in the creation of the dungeons. Ilan thought for a moment and explained to her that this task was not for him, but for them. But Erta replied that since it was for the earth, it turns out it was for him too. Ilan began to shout that the heavens had told him to wait only 10 years, but in the end, those 10 years stretched into 1,000. They said that the monsters would be weak at the beginning of the great cataclysm, but that turned out to be a lie as well. And afterward, they claimed that the monsters in the dungeons should help it grow, but they were useless, which went according to their plan in the first place. And what was the point of making him believe their words? Erta thought and replied that when the gods stopped time on Earth, then that power affected living things, and they developed a resistance to that power. As a result, the dungeons didn't work the way they were supposed to. Ilan asked if that was her explanation for everything that had happened. Erta replied that it was correct, but the boy didn't understand why she was so sure about that. Erta replied that over the course of 1,000 years, he had honed various skills. Especially his ability in blacksmithing had reached a divine level. The only being besides them capable of building dungeons is him. Ilan didn't understand how this was possible. Erta suddenly praised him very much out of the blue, and that was suspicious. He thought she had said it to put a huge job on his shoulders. Erta replied that it was a win-win for both them and him. They do their bidding, and he gets the rewards for completing the task. Ilhan saw that she was smooth sailing like a former rogue, so he decided to ask her what would happen if he refused. Erta replied that monsters would not come to the dungeons, which would cause mankind to have to live in the wild. And here is a blueprint and materials for him. They would provide him with any help he needed. Ilan looked closely and saw it was gemstones. And Erta told him that they are 3 metals used by the higher creatures. They are not on Earth yet. Ilan was shocked that the gems were so big, and Erta showed him his tools. The protagonist was surprised to see top-quality equipment. He could really use all of it. Erta said they would lend them to him for a while, and he would return them when he was done. But Ilhan wondered, how could he build a dungeon using something like this? Wouldn't he have to start by digging the ground? Erta replied that no. The only thing he would have to do is creating magical tools to attract monsters. And that's changing the nearby terrain and creating a dungeon. Based on that blueprint, he has to perfect a destructive trap. And she realizes it's not an easy job. Ilhan replied that already looking at it, he can tell that it will be difficult. And they had better get busy preparing the reward. Erta informed him that she would prepare such a reward that would blow his mind. Ilhan immediately dressed up and was ready to get down to business. He immediately began throwing the gems into the flames. He realized that with the small strength of the eternal flame, it was possible to put magic gems into it. The main character threw a stone in and pulled out another stone altogether, which changed shape and coloring. Ilan worked in the sweat of his brow and didn't even pay attention to anyone. It was just him and his goal. Erta wondered at the same time if she had made a mistake. If Ilhan wasn't a swordsman, and she would have recommended him to become a blacksmith. He is capable of creating weapons that could challenge even a god. After a while, Ilhan sighed for the first time and said that the form is completely finished. But beyond that, somehow he is worried and doesn't know if he will succeed. But Erta warned him, if he messes up, he can melt it down and try again. It will take a very long time. Ilhan sighed before the hard work and set to work. Suddenly, Erta realized. Lita must have sensed it too. In the last 1,000 years, she had personally watched him. She wondered how Lita, being a supreme angel, was interested in an ordinary human. She became angry and only tried to understand what was driving Lita's heart. Nothing else. Suddenly, Ilhan put down his instrument and, wiping his sweat, said he was done. Erta was surprised that the guy was already finished. The stats also suddenly showed that he had awakened a top-level blacksmith and then commandeered the title of legendary creator, and the efficiency of all productive activities increased by 20%. She walked up to him and asked, was he finished? Ilhan was surprised and asked back, what do you mean already? It had been a whole 5 hours. Erta realized that she had lost track of time and had been watching him work for 5 hours. She started screaming that 5 hours was too fast. Surely he was doing everything according to the blueprint? Ilhan placed the stone in her hands and told her to check for herself. Erta examined the stone and saw that it was flawless work, and she couldn't believe it had been made by a human. She told him that it was quite up to standard. Ilhan was surprised and overjoyed, and it was time for him to use craftsman. Erta replied that she would get the other angels to help, and asked him to wait for a while. Ilhan was already hoping Lita would arrive as well, but Erta immediately replied that she would not. Suddenly, Erta began to evolve and a round lamp appeared above her. Ilhan raised his hand and shouted that he knew it was a fluorescent lamp that he had seen in his youth. But Erta replied that it was an angel nimbus, and she knew he would say that. And she couldn't believe the man had created a destructive trap. He finished faster than he should have expected. The smell is not at all like heaven. It was definitely made by a man on earth. But Ilhan was also surprised that the angels were also beautiful. And he didn't realize this when she was small in size. But now that she's as tall as a human, she can see how beautiful she is. Erta asked the boy to hurry up because they don't have time, and hurry up and start crafting mana. And he only needs to focus on wanting to complete the destructive trap. Suddenly behind him was another angel who told him to leave the rest to them. All the angels that had arrived surrounded him and waited for the moment for the guy to begin. As they started, they gave him angelic mana that made Ilhan just scream in pain. He began to feel an incredible pressure. It was as if the mana was suppressing him from all sides. This was the power of the supreme creatures. Suddenly, one of the angels saw that the guy couldn't take it, but Ilhan replied that it wasn't true and he could take it all. To himself, he tried to cheer himself up by asking him to focus on his destructive trap, and that it would attract monsters, be alluring, so that the monsters would go in and couldn't get out again. And the most alluring thing for animals that have endured thousands of years of loneliness. And something to soothe their loneliness? Angel suddenly saw that this guy wasn't bad for an inferior human. Usually people faint when they meet Angel. This guy has a special self-awareness. But the other angel warned the others in that if they made a mistake, they would be swept away, and he would not allow his pride to be wounded. The girl wondered, how could such an interesting person be born? It was simply astonishing. The stats afterwards showed that he had completed the Earth Compact destructive trap, and the mana crafting had increased to level 7, and the quality of the completed artifact improved. Meanwhile, the very same stone formed over Ilhan and began to load. Angel couldn't believe it, since the guy had managed it the first time. The girl also thought it would take him at least 10 tries, but another angel yelled out that the guy even had alpha and beta options. Ilhan was surprised and asked what alpha and beta were. Erta explained to him that they were talking about the extra options attached to the results of the mana crafting job. They are the definitions of Earth and Compact. They appear randomly depending on luck, the object, and the wizard's ability. It's far from every day to see both alpha and beta in their first job. The angels rejoiced and thought he was an awesome person, and suggested he go right now to set up the dungeons. Erta told the boy that he should go too. And would he like to see such a thing? Ilhan did not refuse and answered that he would go. The angels grabbed him with their wings and moved him to the place where everything would happen. Ilhan was in shock because everything around him looked like the apocalypse and the end of the world. Angel suddenly asked, don't they need to apply invisibility on this man? Erta replied that it was fine. If Ilhan doesn't attack first, he certainly won't be detected. and they don't react to him. Angel also said that this is a guy that even God himself doesn't notice. Ilhan suddenly felt that they'd take him for a monkey in the zoo, and now they would see if he would talk to them again after this assignment. Finding the perfect spot, Erta said it was here and released a cube of mana into the sky. The cube started to open, and in a second it was gone. Ilhan was surprised and decided to find out where it went. Did it really just disappear? And Angel had said it was going so smoothly. But Ilhan didn't understand what she meant by that. But suddenly he felt an earthquake. While the military was shouting that a huge rat had arrived and started acting strange, it stopped smashing everything around it as if it was distracted by something. And the huge ants at their side were also moving in the same direction. The military wondered what was going on. Angel watched everything and said that he hated to admit it. Then this person had a great talent for creating traps. Erta notified them that the other dungeons had been activated as well. Ilhan wondered, what other dungeons? But she said they were unusable. Erta replied that was correct. It was just a pity to scramble them. So in other destructive traps, they used magic to change the energy of the dungeons to earth energy. Ilhan also realized now, that's why there was so little harcanium, recycling the first step to a cleaner environment. Angel had been watching them all this time and said that the two of them were so close. But Erta and Ilhan began to deny her information. But he saw with his own eyes how all the monsters were gathering in one place. And even though the animals have lived for 1,000 years, the result is that they just head into a destructive trap, just as the God and angels wanted. And now he realizes that divine power is absolute. God is able to send all of humanity to another world in an instant, and the monsters are helpless before his almighty power. In the end, humans too dance in the palm of God's hand. The fact that he was the only one left for 1,000 years was explained in a one-word mistake. And he realizes if Lita wasn't around, he would have lost his mind here long ago. But now she's not here, and he wants to be stronger so that nothing and no one can control him. And he wishes only to become stronger for the sake of his own freedom. But in the evening, Status notified the master that there was a report that the cause of the sudden monster movements in Seoul last night. And it was the activation of dungeons located in different places. Dungeons have appeared not only in Seoul, but all over Korea, Japan, and even parts of China. And the reporter on Yogi, he is asked to clarify the details. But Ilhan has begun to wonder when his parents will return. And he can't even imagine how these two can fight. But since they have a lot of experience living in society, it's likely that they somehow survive in another world. Suddenly, Erta said that the dungeons seemed to be functioning properly, and Ilhan had done a good job. Ilhan asked her, didn't she say he had 27 more things to do? Why did the angels have to leave? He could start work right now. Erta replied that it takes a colossal amount of mana to make a destructive trap. They need 2 days to restore it. Ilhan asked, they aren't the only angels, are they? For example, there is also Lita. Erta replied that not all angels are so free. For his convenience, Lita takes on extra work, which makes it hard for her. She won't be able to appear on Earth for a while. Ilhan realized that his Lita would not be able to make it. So he suggested her to go to the workshop. Poke will start working on the base. Erta saw that the guy was indeed completely immersed in his work. On the way, Ilhan said that he thought, why did it get bigger when they were creating the dungeon, and now it's small? Erta replied that as an angel, she has other tasks to do. It was the perfect size to be his assistant. The boy saw that she drew the line perfectly, and they arrived at the workshop after a long drive. Ilhan set to work and decided to make more traps for tomorrow, but Erta thought that glad his yesterday's result was above reproach. She would give him a small gift. And after that, he would hardly have time to make traps. Ilhan asked, is she going to give him more harcanium? That metal is pretty good. Erta asked him to stop daydreaming and provided him the drying and sterilization of the monster skin he got from the hunt, and completed in a second. Ilhan looked at the gifts and saw that it fit perfectly, and the quality had improved as well. Erta asked him how he liked it. Now he had a job. Ilhan rejoiced and told her that now with this, he could make gloves and boots. After a while, Status revealed that he had crafted leather gauntlets of the dire wolf. And the class is rare. The armor is 600 points, and the attack power is 700. And then crafted the leather boots of the dire wolf. The class was also rare. The armor was 550 points, and the attack power was already 750. Ilhan got excited and saw that it had the option of airing. Still, it would be problematic if he had a hard time moving, due to it being very hot. Erta wondered when he had time to learn strengthening techniques. The guy replied that he said for hard work you need to know a lot of things. He would make armor out of the bear's hide. Erta watched everything and saw him trying and succeeding. The next morning Erta woke up and said that it had been a day already. And why doesn't he get some rest? Ilan replied that a little more, and he will finish. And he doesn't feel tired. And now Angel believes sleepless night has no effect on his superhuman endurance. Suddenly, Ilhan shouted with joy that he had succeeded. He made the leather armor of a sturdy bear. Erta walked over and asked, "Is it complete?" The boy replied that there was still some work left to do, and he still needed to strengthen it. Ilhan released his mana into it and made it even stronger. After the job was done, he said that there were hidden functions in this armor. Erta also replied that she thought she understood what it was made of based on its name. She applied her mana, and the armor released a hidden technique, and realized that it hid sharp spikes appearing to counterattack when taking damage. Ilhan replied that it was correct, and she is acting like a hedgehog, and a hedgehog can make even a tiger flee. Erta remembered that the wristband he had made last time had hidden a mantis claw-style blade. She decided to ask him why he hid blades in his armor, but Ilhan didn't bother to answer her, to which she was surprised. She realized it was only a casual question, but the atmosphere. Erta decided to ask, did he have some special reason for it? Did the hedgehog hurt his parents? Ilhan replied that it was because of the man's dream. Erta was shocked from such a deep meaning of his words. She asked angrily, "What the hell is this nonsense?" And it seems that this time too, the alpha and beta options are present. And everyone might start thinking that everything he creates with mana crafting will definitely have options in it. Ilan replied that there are still bones left. He will use them to make a carving knife. It was a bit hard to cut up monster carcasses with a spear. He worked a little on the workpiece and created a knife from a bear bone. Then he made a mask in the shape of the skull of a terrible wolf. Erta asked him, did he make another mask? Ilhan replied that was correct. There were a couple of extra materials left over. After changing his clothes, he showed what he had made, and it looked pretty cool. But Erta wondered what the guy had done with the mask. His presence began to be felt even fainter. This is incredible. The guy replied that he hadn't done anything to it. But suddenly something happened, and he became wary. Ilan immediately asked, what was that sound? Something is happening outside. Erta replied that it sounded like someone was fighting a monster right now. Ilan heard about the monsters and immediately put on his mask and prepared to move out to slay. The news had already said that everything happened in the Chano district, where a huge Class 2 monster had appeared. The people currently in the building are advised to flee to another world immediately. Erta found that it was a monster unlocked in the dungeon, but Ilhan prayed that the monster was weaker than a huge future bear. The angel asked him if he was afraid to fight now, right? The boy answered that no, that wasn't the point. If he is stronger than that bear, then he will need to skin it and make new armor. And before the battle, he would need to repair his steel spear. He immediately set to work and improved his spear. Seeing it shining rejoiced him, and he just fixed it, but his attack power increased by 300. But he didn't stop there and asked the angel to give him a tool. But Erta replied that she wouldn't give it to him, and the guy started begging her. Once outside, he started running towards the monster's point of arrival, while people were running away from there. Erta saw the monster and showed him where it was. At this point, the monster was so strong that it could hang from houses. The military tried to finish it off, but the monster was so fast that it blew up a helicopter with its claws. The military were surprised that even an anti-tank missile didn't work, and those with second classes have them go out and shut him up with knives. And they should launch the rockets. If nothing is done, the Blue House will be under attack. Ilan saw that in addition to the soldiers, those with second classes were fighting. In another world, they could safely gain experience points. But fighting a strong opponent here on Earth was too much. And even people with second classes won't be able to easily defeat a second-class monster. However, they are not wrong. Even if they can go to another world, Earth is where it lives. Therefore, everything will lose meaning if it is destroyed. But he doesn't plan to risk his life for others. But if he has to try a little harder to save the others, he will definitely do it. Ilan ran with great speed between the people towards the monster, while the monster saw him and opened its huge mouth. Erta notified him that this leopard was definitely stronger than the huge brown bear. Suddenly, the military man joined in and fired a missile at the leopard that exploded right in front of its face. The military man said, "That's great, they hit him." If they shot him in the face, he would definitely be hurt. But the leopard stayed alive after such an explosion and directed his sharp gaze right at them. The soldiers saw this and immediately turned around and started running away. The leopard did not tear them apart and stepped with his huge foot on the tank, only heard the military asking him to let them go. But things turned out to be much more horrible. The leopard lifted the tank with his foot and slowly reached out to his mouth. But Ilhan didn't leave it at that and attacked the monster from afar. And never was he more grateful than now for the stealth of his presence. The leopard saw the shape of the man before it at the last moment, and its eye immediately grew in size. But Ilhan was so fast that he stuck his spear directly into the leopard's eye. The stats showed that he had made a critical hit. The humans rejoiced that Sunbolt had not gone to the other world, and they were saved. Elin stood over the leopard like its master, but the leopard was very angry that it threw the tank with the humans aside. The military man, seeing this, immediately ordered his men to start firing and asked them to fire with everything they had. But Ilhan did not leave the men from the tank and cut the top of the vehicle and wanted to save them. The military men from the tank raised their heads with fear and didn't know who had come to their rescue. But Ilhan got close to them and told them that if they didn't want to die, then firmly let him take his hand. Taking both military men from the tank, he pulled out and saved their lives. One of them was so badly frightened that he even asked for help after they were rescued. But when they came to their senses, they thanked Sunbolt, and from that day on, he was their favorite. Ilhan didn't really do it to be considered a hero. He only saved them because he could. But his instincts worked, and he sensed danger. But he managed to warn them to run away from here. The leopard immediately approached them and started growling. But Ilhan noticed and shared that this monster is smarter than a bear. He understands who poses the greatest threat to him. Erta immediately asked him to be careful, and the leopard noticed him. His stealth was no longer working. Ilhan answered her not to worry. This was an enemy he could overpower even if he fought directly. One of the men saw the monster distracted and relayed to the military that this was their chance to attack. The military immediately charged their tanks and fired missiles at the monster, and realized that the leopard was focused on Sunbolt. And now is the perfect opportunity to attack. We need everyone to use magic and aim for his eyes. Suddenly, a bolt of lightning landed from the sky and plunged straight into the monster's eyes. The people were shocked and didn't understand where the lightning came from. As they looked closer, they saw that a stranger had attacked the monster from a helicopter. People began to wonder if it was the girl who summoned the lightning. It was the Empress. But has she always been so beautiful, they wondered. After all, they had not noticed her in any way before. The leopard got a bunch of shot from the missiles, and even added was lightning from the sky. Elin stood in front of him the whole time and shouted for the monsters to come up first. The leopard didn't bother to stop and let loose an attack with its claws, but the guy immediately dodged by doing a few somersaults. But the monster was a bit fast, and seeing the guy in the air, crashed with his head. The men were greatly frightened for his health and didn't know what they would do if the guy died. The Empress was also surprised by this and didn't know what had happened from below or how he was feeling. But one of the old men asked the others to take a closer look, and seeing the blood on the floor, they thought it was a huge hedgehog. Ilin made sure his money had paid off, but Erta replied that she would tell him something first. He actually looked terrible, but looks didn't matter to the guy. But Erta asked him if he would mind if Lita saw him looking like that. Ilhan replied that he wouldn't. He wouldn't care. And Erta saw that the guy now understood what she was talking about. But Ilhan noticed that the monster was moving too intensely, and the angel felt like she was getting motion sickness. But the guy had asked her not to do it on him, and he actually should have learned rock climbing. The monster moved with great speed and attacked the guy, but Ilhan dodged and the monster crashed against the rocks. Standing over the monster, Ilhan lowered himself down and released the spikes from his legs, which he stabbed until they were bloody and then stuck his spear in. The stats began to show that the master had used critical strike, and his skill appeared level 2. The military looked at it too and saw that the monster slowed down and asked to release fire, and asked the military to keep firing faster and faster. Erta realized that for a Class 2 monster, attacks from humans only have Class 1 have no effect. However, sometimes even an army of ants could overpower an elephant. The humans were trying their best to destroy it and were beating its legs with various sharp objects. And Ilhan saw that this showed the importance of strategies. Erta asked him to hurry up and finish here with him, but Ilhan wondered why. He actually thinks they'll manage to take care of the rest. and this leopard is on the verge of getting a grade 3. But suddenly, something started coming out of the monster's head. Ilhan was shocked and didn't understand what it was. Erta replied that his upper body was starting to mutate. Evolution is going too fast. The guy told her that he wasn't the best in the business regarding tentacles. Maybe she'll bring an elven archer or a princess knight. But Erta asked him if he realizes that this is no time for jokes, and she hopes he realizes that she can't help him even if he dies here. The protagonist replied that he thought a joke would help them at least not die. The guy actually hasn't even fully turned into a class 3 monster yet. And Ilhan also realizes that he needs to deal with him while he has the chance. But suddenly the Empress released her lightning bolt and aimed it at the creature. Ilhan turned around and was surprised to see the Empress. She notified him that she couldn't kill him, and the difference in levels was too great. Ilhan noticed that the creature was still regenerating. It needs to take enough damage for it to stop regenerating. The Empress shouted that she could enhance it with magic. The guy didn't understand. What do you mean amplify it? The girl replied that however he would have no mana left afterward, and is he sure that he will be able to kill him? Ilhan asked her if she could just reinforce him. The Empress replied that she would count on her then. The Empress came down from the helicopter and said she needed to make physical contact. It would take all of his mana, and after that she wouldn't be able to help him in any way, and her entire life would be in his hands. Ilhan just didn't understand. What did he mean her life would be in his hands? The Empress didn't want to waste any more time and began her reinforcement. The stats immediately showed the boy that the Thunder Spirit was being instilled into his body, and it was being instilled during each of his attacks. Erta watched and said, "Excellent for a human." He was able to act so much mana to both attack and have reinforcement while only possessing class 1. Ilhan rejoiced and decided that if anything, he would immediately stick his spear right into the leopard's head. The Empress yelled that if they didn't kill him, the military would launch missiles. And if it came to that, they wouldn't be able to contain the increased damage to the building and people. The guy replied that this could not be allowed to happen, and his workshop is nearby. Ilhan applied his critical strike and then used an additional lightning strike. The lightning went through Leopard's body and slowly killed him from the inside. The stats immediately showed that he had received a large amount of points. After finishing his task, he crouched down to rest. Erta praised him for his good work, and he managed to finish off the monster before he got a grade 3. The Empress asked, "Is this leopard surely dead?" The guy replied that yes and asked her if she had gotten experience. She fell to her knees and realized she wasn't on the same team with him. Ilhan was surprised to hear about the team and didn't know there was such a system here at all. After all, he always went alone, so he didn't even know about it. It wasn't his fault at all that he didn't know about it. Erta also confirmed that such loners don't join the team, and he can forget about it. It wasn't something he didn't need. The status suddenly showed that the time of the enhancement had expired, and the effectiveness of all abilities would be halved for 3 minutes. But Erta started scolding him and saying that he had barely defeated him, and it would be a great disappointment if he died, a crushed corpse. People began to cheer for the victory and shouted that Sunbolt had done it. And the help from the Empress was amazing, and Sunbolt had won with them. Erta was upset and said with a rough voice that he was being praised and could rejoice, but was surprised by his expression and decided to find out what was the matter. The enemy was finished and he was victorious. Ilhan disagreed and replied that he only now noticed that the shukra was all tattered. He wouldn't be able to make new leather armor out of it. Erta wondered if it was that important. Ilhan replied that yes, it was. It's very important. The military man approached the monster and said that the monster died, causing it to be halved. How would they divide the trophy? He was answered that they had to break it into pieces first, and he could try it first. But Ilhan approached them and asked them to stop, and explained that cutting up a corpse was his specialty. But when he saw the Empress, he apologized and asked her what would be the best way to divide it. But as he looked at her, he realized she was beautiful, and he didn't even know the Empress was that pretty. The Empress replied that the boy would get 60% of it, and they would share the other 40% with the rest. Ilhan asked if that was okay with everyone. He thought, and after evaluating everything, did a somersault and cut the leopard in two. He immediately found the point and pulled out the stone. He knew there would be one here, but Erta advised that he should expect high quality from this stone, since this monster almost evolved to a class 3. And it's a class 2 magic stone. Ilhan asked how could that be, But the Empress answered him that it could be accounted for 60%. The guy agreed to that and told them to divide the rest as they wanted. The military man started yelling that it was a magic stone. Shouldn't it be accounted for separately? The men also started yelling that it was right. They too had put their lives on the line in the fight. They too had been injured. They were against such a division. This was what Erta expected from them. Inferior creatures are completely hopeless. She was a fool to think everyone was just like Ilhan. The protagonist thanked her for her praise, but Erta was glad he at least realized it was a compliment. Elon thought for a moment and explained that since everyone was against it, he would do things differently. After telling his decision, the military man rejoiced and said he was lucky to be a well-mannered man who listened to what others said. Erta asked the guy, what will he do? Would he really just give them the magic stone like that? Ilhan replied that it was not easy to convince people in such a situation. His mother always told him to remember, settling with words between people who want to surpass him is very difficult. So there's no need for words, when he can use his fists. And like a good son, he will follow his mother's words. He hands over the magic stone and sent it straight into Leopard's body, from where he pulled it out himself. He asked them to do as they please, and as they said earlier, he will get his share. And if he fell short of his 60%, no one would leave here in one piece. People were scared and didn't even realize how they could get their 60% exactly right. And why were they complaining to Sunbolt? And even if they all banded together, they couldn't do anything to him, so they told him to just take the magic stone. But the Empress told him that if he gave her share at the cutting, she'd give him 40% of it, and she would give him more skin than bones. Ilhan was surprised at her offer and agreed, and it would take a car to transport it all. Ilhan heard the Empress call for a car. She is either from a rich family or owns a successful business. And if you think of it that way, she flew here by helicopter, and it must have cost him money. The military man approached and asked him to split their share. Ilhan got upset and didn't want to do it. The people started begging him to save them, and they need his help. They can't skin it themselves. Even if they try to do it, they will only mess it up. The military man also explained that he too wants to get the trophy and go to the other world as soon as possible. Erta said, inferior beings that they are. A minute ago they were trying to take the magic stone from him, and now they're asking him to do the chopping. Humans have no sense of shame whatsoever, and she loves her job, and she'll probably quit and move to the village. When Ilhan heard that, he asked her to get Lita as her replacement. Erta changed her mind and said she would work for now. But Ilhan told the people that he would take 50% in return for cutting. People started to get indignant and asked him why he is taking 40% from the Empress and 50% from them. This is discrimination. After all, he wants 50% from them just for cutting. Ilhan turned around and replied that if they didn't want it, they didn't have to. The soldier immediately stopped him and agreed to 50%. And they asked him to divide it into equal parts. But why is he taking one more share? And why is there a difference in size? And why does he speak to him in first name? How old is the guy really? Ilhan was tired and realized that it was time for him to go home already. But suddenly the Empress asked him if he should stop. She praised his stealth skill, and she wouldn't have noticed him leave if she hadn't been focused on him. Ilhan hadn't actually chosen that skill. The Empress would like to form a team with him, if he's okay with it, and she thinks he would be the perfect partner. But Ilhan turned her down and replied that he didn't think so. The Empress revealed that she plans to stay on Earth. And she's not so weak that he needs to go back to another world for missions. And he thinks so too, doesn't he? And they'll probably see each other a lot more often. And here's her card, and asks him to contact her. Ilhan took the card, and when he saw the inscription Khan Mir on it, he realized that it was the name of the Empress. And he actually likes that she is not pushy, and notified Erta that it was time for them to go home, as there was still a lot of work left to do. Arriving at the workshop, he began to create portals. He created 5 portals. Erta notified him that the monster was about to evolve to level 3, but she doesn't understand what's wrong with the land. Ilhan gave her a tip to ask the god. Erta grabbed her head and started screaming that she couldn't come to a conclusion on her own. The guy repeated again for her to ask God, and then she just kept quiet. And why is she complaining now? Erta replied that she has to maintain her reputation as a superior creature. And how can she show her displeasure in front of a crowd of inferior creatures? Ilhan did not argue with her and agreed. But Erta didn't like it and decided to ask him why he was so calm. This is the problem with his world. And he doesn't really realize what a huge problem the appearance of a Class 3 monster is. In a world with people who only have a Class 1, she realized that the balance of power is now heavily tipped on the side of the monsters. And at the moment, humans are getting stronger in the other world by doing simple tasks that God provided them. But the monsters are evolving much faster. And how can they adjust the balance? Ilhan let her know he wasn't calm. He won't accomplish anything with simple experiences, so he's just doing what he can. And decided to ask her how things were going in other countries? Erta replied that Korea is the only country where monsters are on the verge of getting grade 3. That's when Ilhan decided that the destructive trap might be a problem. Erta suddenly thought about the words that the destructive trap strengthened the monsters. That was impossible according to her knowledge, but it could have been a trigger. And the monsters, feeling threatened, must have awakened and become aggressive. Erta told her that in other worlds, monsters were banned before they could suspect anything. And for that reason, for the most part, the evolution of monsters took place in dungeons. Through countless interbreeding in dungeons, more and more new dangerous monsters appear, which devour each other, making evolution in dungeons extremely rare. But if they are not locked in dungeons, then they will evolve by eating humans instead of other monsters. Monsters don't fight each other very often. That's why their growth is stunted in dungeons. Ilan now realized that dungeons were necessary for humans. Erta answered that yes, which also means the guy's doing a lot of good for humanity by making dungeons. But Ilhan said he needs to hurry up and make more destructive traps. Erta suddenly asked the guy, does he like to create stuff? The guy thought for a moment and answered with the excuse that it's fun, but there would be no point if that was the end of it. And the reason he created things was to get new experiences. Erta realized that was right. He had to live in an unchanging world for 1,000 years all alone after all. And now it was clear to her why he was seeking new experiences. And what had she just thought of? She showed sympathy for an inferior creature. But in truth, she realizes it's not such a bad feeling. She asked him to get stronger, and then he could experience more things. Whenever and wherever. Ilan knew what she was talking about and knew perfectly well, and he would become stronger. That evening when night fell, the angels returned, having recovered their mana. Finished with creating destructive traps using mana crafting, the angels went off to create dungeons. But Ilhan doesn't know which way the dungeon will be. But hopefully no more dangerous monsters will show up. And even if a Class 3 monster appears because of the destructive trap, it won't be his fault, Erta notified him. After all, he is now on an important mission. Ilan replied that he understood that and was grateful for her concern. After looking at each other, the boy felt tired and headed home to sleep. Ilhan immediately went to the shower and looking in the mirror was a little shocked at what he saw. But when he got out of the shower, he asked her if she thought he had gained a little weight. Erta replied to him that he grows every time he goes up a level, so he shouldn't be surprised. The guy thought for a moment and shared that he feels like he's gotten better looking too. But he wondered what she thought. Angel replied that his face didn't make any difference to a higher being like her, but to a human it might. Elin got excited and started showing her his body and bragging about it. But Erta was angry with him, and throwing her crunches at him told him not to block the TV, and got dressed. Elin turned around and headed off to rest, and she should go to bed early too, and shouldn't watch TV for too long. But Erta, after he left, raised her crunches and thought about something, and realized that such a body and face were nothing among the higher creatures. And Ilhan's greatest significance is not on the outside, but on the inside. But suddenly she stopped and saw that if she said that, it would sound like she was praising his inner qualities. And imagine Lita showing her how awesome his Ilhan is. And she's glad that Erta agrees with that too. Meanwhile, Ilhan was already dreaming and mumbling that he missed Lita. The next morning, the boy opened his eyes and saw a status in front of him. He thought at first that it was an alarm clock, but then he stayed on the skill. He read carefully and found out that it was a rest skill, and he didn't even know that such a skill existed. Erta suddenly flew up and was shocked to hear about the rest skill, and she didn't know when he had time to learn a skill with SSS difficulty. The guy himself didn't know it was a skill of that rank, and some kind of rest, and she must be messing with him. But Angel still kept finding out how he learned it. Even she hadn't learned it yet. Ilhan wondered if Angel was being serious. And that skill is so awesome. Every night for the last 100 years, he's been trying to find a way to sleep in the most comfort. And Erta thought the guy had studied sleep with such diligence. And he had studied a skill that is incredibly hard to obtain and even harder to advance. And now she was very impressed, and she was truly amazed. Ilhan wondered what the skill was for. Angel replied that it was to sleep well and rest. Ilhan was not satisfied with that and was saddened that that was the end of it. Erta asked what else could it be used for. But that wasn't really the point. But Ilhan saw that if that was the only plus, she wouldn't be so shocked. And she should come clean and tell the truth. Erta replied that she wasn't trying to hide it. And it was time to tell him about the evolution of skills. Ilhan decided to find out what was the evolution of skills. Angel replied that skill evolution is an achievement similar to skill acquisition, and the same rules apply there as when you move to the next class. It offers new paths based on the user's lived experience, and it's something like the path of the Akasha Chronicles. But suddenly he had a question, and she asked, "What is it?" Ilhan asked her to have her explain it all to him like he was 5 years old. Erta showed and told him that this was how he was getting stronger afterwards due to the evolution of the skill. The guy listened, and it became much easier for him to understand. But she didn't end there, and continued to tell him that the skills he had, satisfying conditions for evolution. And they are taijutsu, spear wielding, rest and stealth. Cutting and blacksmithing don't have next levels. He's already perfected in those. And stealth is a skill he doesn't know how to control, so without taking it into account. Taijutsu and spear wielding have requirements for evolution, but difficult to achieve at his level, so excludes those too. That's why she didn't tell him anything about skill evolution. Ilya thought about it and realized that a recreation skill was something else entirely, and Erta had told him the same thing, which he could check for himself. Ilhan looked around and didn't understand what it was. How was he supposed to accomplish all this? Erta replied that it was nothing compared to the others. The boy didn't realize at what point could it be easy. She asked him to check the requirements for the evolution of the spear skill. Looking closely, she asked him if he had seen it. If the requirements for the evolution of the spear skill is akin to conquering Everest for him, then the requirements for the skill of recreation is Mount Pektu. Ilhan said that doesn't mean climbing Mount Pektu is easy, but Angel replied that he could easily do it. But he informed her that she constantly overestimates him. He can't even use mana, and he's still only level 28. And the guy's level increase is really too slow. It's because of his title. And the wall against mana is absolute. The difference between someone who can use mana and someone who can't is very big. And the reason Ilhan is strong now is because of the martial arts he has honed to perfection over 1,000 years. And if any of his martial arts or characteristics are lacking, he will be surpassed by others. But what if he learns how to use mana, she thought? Then he would be the one who could dominate all the creatures of the Akasha Chronicles. And that day would surely come. But what kind of revolution would he make when he was stronger, she thought. She sighed and decided she'd better not think about it anymore. And it was dangerous to keep thinking like that. But arriving home, Ilhan was shocked at what he saw, for the table was completely open. But he saw a note from his mother on the table, where it was written that the rest of the dishes would be found in the refrigerator. But Ilhan realized that he had to find and kill the trolls, and he doesn't know if they are on Earth. Erta told him that once the mana is activated, monsters that haven't lived here before will start appearing. The mana will be amplified, and creatures that did not exist on Earth will live here. Ilhan asked her, was she used to being a teacher? Erta replied that she was amazing at explaining on his level. Suddenly the television turned on, which was telling the following news. The news portal was telling that this was the place where the Class 2 monsters were attacked a few days ago, and due to this incident, many buildings were destroyed. Ilhan remembered that this was where he had fought 2 days ago. Erta asked, was this really the place where he left the corpse of the huge leopard? Looking closer, she was surprised that the body was gone, and they had cleaned it up in just 2 days. Erta told him it wasn't what he thought. But the news also said that the place where the dead body of the 2-class monster was lying was completely gone, and it disappeared along with the people who shared the spoils of the hunt. Ilhan was shocked to hear this. But some people said that a dungeon opened up and swallowed them. The boy denied everything and couldn't believe that it could be a dungeon, and realized that there was another monster in there. Erta told him that the huge leopard was definitely dead. They even took his mana stone. The hunt is over at this point 99.9% of the time. Ilhan asked, then what about the remaining 0.01%? Erta replied that a pregnant monster, if it had a baby that was about to be born. And that's when Ilhan found out that she was pregnant. And just for a moment, but he saw a black leopard on the screen. And he thinks the monster is just a master of stealth. And that wouldn't have happened if he'd followed through with the cutting. Erta informed him that it wasn't his fault. It was the consequence of those people's greed. But Ilhan knew that many people had died. Among them were those who had supported him or helped and trusted him. She hadn't really expected this, nor had she thought it would hurt him so much. And she still didn't understand him well. And the kid now realized why he was so rampant up until the moment of his death. He was doing that to protect his child. Erta confirmed and realizes that it was her fault for not thinking about the possibility of this situation, especially since this kitten's special skill is stealth. It left half of its body without undressing it. And that leopard must have been hiding there. And Erta realizes that she couldn't spot him because of his stealth skill. And because people were arguing over who was taking what, and the mother's body wasn't completely cut up, and he assumes those people spent a lot of time arguing over Lut. And while they were arguing, the baby was born. Erta thought about it and called it a marvelous coincidence. But Ilhan hoped it wasn't true. But if it was, a Class 3 monster was born. Erta replied that considering how good his stealth skill was, he is definitely a Class 3 monster. Ilhan got tired of listening to all this and turned off the TV. Erta decided to ask him if he could handle it. The guy replied that it would be hard to do it alone, but it's probably worth a try if he's well prepared. And besides, if the opponent is a stealth user, he can't afford to lose. Erta was surprised, and that's what she expected from Stealth Master Ilhan. The guy had asked her not to call him Master. It's not like he has any other skills as good as stealth. Erta replied that she thought he didn't. And it's impossible to have excellent skills in all areas. Since the stealth skill is good, his defense and strength should be so developed. And if he makes up for it with stealth skill, then it's worth fighting him. Ilhan agreed and will create equipment right now. He dressed up and should kill him as soon as possible, because alone, he will do a lot of damage. Suddenly, he remembered that he should ask for help. The business card he was given. This is it. Erta asked him, is he going to call from that phone? He could just make a public announcement that Sunbolt is Ilhan. Ilhan agreed that he would be exposed if he used his phone. He decided to take a different course of action and headed to the phone on the street and decided to call her. Erta agreed that she could help him, and it was a good decision. The Empress saw the call and immediately realized that the call was being made from a phone booth. Ilhan began to hesitate and said that he and she hadn't spoken in 2 days. The Empress asked who it was. Ilhan covered his nose to make his voice change and replied that it was Sunbolt. When the Empress heard his name, she was immediately happy. She told him that she didn't expect him to call her so soon. Ilhan felt embarrassed at that moment. The Empress informed him that he must be embarrassed by his nickname. Ilhan asked her bluntly, had she seen the news? And it's not a dungeon, it's a monster strong with stealth skill. The Empress thought and replied that she could guess what happened. And it is very dangerous. Finishing the conversation, Ilhan saw that Kang Mir quickly realized everything. She said she would tell the army and the government just in case. Erta suggested that she had a lot of connections. But the boy wondered immediately, should he prepare himself as well? Arriving at the workshop, Ilhan prepared everything and said that the base was ready, and then it was time to get straight to work. Erta asked what he would be crafting. His steel spear should be suitable as a weapon. Ilhan asked her if she would just keep quiet, but Erta started pulling his hair and asked again what he would be crafting. The boy replied that the poles. Erta didn't understand what he was talking about, but the guy didn't stop and quickly got everything ready. Erta asked, what are they for? Does he want to make something like a necklace for the giant? Ilhan replied that no, and asked her to go back to kindergarten and study again. The protagonist started right away to his work, but Erta saw the shape and realized everything. She assumed it was a spear, but the boy replied that it was not. When Erta finished her work, she saw the object and shouted that it was a harpoon. Ilhan immediately confirmed her words and told her that it was much different from a spear. It must be thrown at its prey in order to attract it to you. Harpoons are mostly used in whale hunting. A harpoon is easy to throw, but hard to pull out. An ordinary rope will not cope with this role, so if he makes a rope from the skin of a huge leopard, it will be strong enough. Erta saw that the guy was really good at it, and is he sure he hasn't started using mana? Otherwise, it would be impossible to do it so quickly. But Ilhan didn't understand. Why would he create a weapon if he knew how to use mana? He would go to the monster right now. With everything done, Ilhan showed that everything was ready. Erta thought that using a mother's bones to kill her child was very cruel. And the boy thought it was a good fishing rod. And taking the craft mana in his hands, he decided to embed it in the harpoon. Erta yelled at him to stop. He's going to spend all of it on making just one weapon? And the guy doesn't think it's an excessive waste. Ilhan replied that he didn't and thought it was for his own survival. Erta assumed that this is Ilhan's mindset. So the guy decided he would spring into action. Implementing it into a weapon status revealed that an aggressive and violent leopard hunter's harpoon had been created. Erta was surprised that even the skill's activation time was reduced. Mana crafting usually isn't that easy. And Ilhan rejoiced that it was the alpha and beta options again. But Angel realized that these options don't always come out. But then seeing the following statuses, she realized that even the guy's options were top-notch. Ilhan replied that the Akasha Chronicles understand everything. The options really are top-notch. This weapon turned out twice as good as he had planned. Erta realized it was cheating at this point, but Ilhan asked her, was something wrong? The next day he called Kana, and the girl asked the guy if he was ready. After all, she would be there soon. Ilhan asked her that she should not go right now. The monster has a stealth skill. He can attack her from behind. He was born almost immediately after his mother died. That was 2 days ago, but he's still there. Kana asked why that is so. The boy replied that it's probably to get back at the humans for killing his mother. And they need to be extra careful, since they were the ones who killed the huge leopard. Kana said she was prepared, but did he have any plan? Ilhan didn't hold back and replied that everything is right. And he will make an act that he can't use stealth, and that's why she has to wait until then. Kana decided that she would leave it up to him. After the conversation, Ilhan headed on his way. Erta sensed that he wasn't far away, and he didn't seem to be scared at all. And that's very brave. And he probably just trusts his stealth. He hasn't noticed him yet. Ilhan suddenly wondered how long it would take him to make him afraid. Setting his trap, he deliberately made a sound, but the monster didn't attack. It should have attacked him by now. Erta said she doubted he had found it, but Ilhan couldn't believe it. But the girl told him that it simply meant that his stealth skill was better than leopard's. His pillars and harpoon were also hidden by his stealth. Ilhan saw that the monster didn't notice anything, even though he was setting a trap right in front of him. And Erta realized that he really was born to be an assassin. He should definitely choose assassin as his subclass the next time he changed his title. Ilhan felt that it was just humiliating for him, but Erta told him that he had an advantage in this situation anyway. There was no need to miss this chance. At this moment, the hidden leopard slowly walked beside him, and Ilhan sensed his presence. Feeling his status immediately showed a 10% damage increase due to stealth. Ilhan understood everything, and since the harpoon counted as a spear, he got the skill effect. The guy gained perfect speed and aimed the harpoon straight at the leopard. The harpoon hit right on target, and leopard felt so much pain that he roared. Erta saw him and said that he was about half the size of his mother, but he definitely possesses a third class. Ilhan explained that he had gotten bonus effects from stealth and spear art, but the harpoon still only went in halfway. Erta replied that if it had been a normal class 3 monster in its place, it would have been even worse. And since he specialized in stealth, his health and defense should be reduced. And he could be glad that he had developed stealth. Ilhan got angry and replied that he knew. The leopard also saw his enemy and headed to attack him. Erta saw this and told him to be careful. The leopard immediately waved his paw and attacked, but Ilhan dodged and saw that the monster was fast. The harpoon immediately worked after the leopard drew it and felt the pain stop. Ilhan saw that the rope was holding well. He raised his harpoon and sent it back into leopard's body. The stats showed that it was his critical hit. Ilhan rejoiced, but the leopard launched an attack with his paw, and the guy managed to get his hands up in time. Ilhan felt his defenses weaken, and the bone blades were all broken. But he was glad he hadn't lost his hands, and he would be able to repair them. Erta was surprised that the ugly hedgehog defenses on his arms did help, and to her that was a shame. The leopard tried to destroy the guy, but Ilhan kept dodging. But suddenly there was an explosion nearby, and Ilhan decided to find out what it was. Erta replied that it was a skill. Ilhan said that he definitely had a lot of trump cards up his sleeve since he had a third class. Ilhan picked up the moment and stuck his harpoon into her, and informed her that if he resisted, it would only hurt more. But the leopard was smarter than that, and began to gnaw on the rope with his teeth. Erta told him to use the rest of the harpoons before he chewed through the rope. Ilhan didn't really think he would have a long-range cutting skill. He thought that monsters were just very strong beasts, but now he would have to face monsters that were beyond common sense and logic. Ilan used his stealth and speed and stuck harpoons into the monster from different sides. He said that with such a paw, the leopard wouldn't be able to use its long-range skill. Erta thought he was quite talented in spear throwing. Ilhan asked her if she could call him Ishmael. Angel was surprised and didn't understand what he meant, and the guy was shocked that she didn't know about Moby Dick. Erta informed him that it was too early to relax. The situation was not yet resolved. Suddenly, Kana asked him, "Is that the monster?" And he's really good at stealth. Kana was driving a car at that moment and was holding an explosive using her lightning bolt. She threw it directly at Leopard and used her double lightning. Kana decided to ask him how he managed to capture that monster. Ilhan was glad that Kana had come, and that's not what a person who struck a monster with lightning should be asking. He realized that she was definitely no ordinary hunter. The power of this attack was astonishing for a first class. But more importantly, the leopard broke free and headed for his enemies. Ilhan stood with Kana to war against the monster, and it seems the monster moved again, felt. The protagonist immediately placed another pole on the ground and prepared to release his harpoon. The leopard began to agonize and tried to climb out, but Ilhan immediately sent the harpoon straight into its leg. Ilhan notified the Empress to attack him when he was ready. The leopard is strong, so he doesn't know how long the pillars can last. He decided to ask her when she could counterattack. The girl replied that she can do it now by using lightning. And in a couple minutes, she would be able to hit with a lot of power. Ilhan asked her to make sure she warns him when she uses a strong attack. Erta saw that the monster was not out of mana yet. Ilhan already knew that. The leopard was trying to get out of the trap, and his eyes were even redder with anger. Ilhan realized that by that look, he was communicating to him his intent to kill. He had seen eyes like that many times before. A cornered beast becomes much stronger because of its desire to survive. And strangely enough, it is at this moment that living creatures shine brightest. Like a flame blazing even stronger, because he knows that after that flame, emptiness will follow. But Kana applied his lightning attack and aimed it directly at the monster's eye. From the strong impact, the leopard became feral and began to growl. Ilhan didn't realize what it was. He became quite strong. Erta said it was buff bleeding mineralization, and the guy should be careful. Ilhan also realized that he was very angry too. But Kana, seeing this, applied her lightning strike at full power and aimed at the beast. She saw that the lightning couldn't reach him, and it would be hard to get any closer. The leopard got tired of waiting and getting hurt, and became even more furious. Ilhan saw this and called him a stubborn bastard, and probably wants his paws torn off. He decided that to paralyze him like before, he would have to wait for the Empress to be ready. Ilhan climbed onto the car and asked her if she had any stronger magical skills. The driver pulled a machine gun out of the car and asked, "How about his?" Ilhan was surprised to see the gun, but the driver wondered if it would be enough. Ilhan replied that no, he was just thinking about something, but now was not the time to think about it. Kana asked the guy if he knew how to use a shotgun. Ilhan replied that he knows how to use most of the weapons on Earth. The protagonist picked up the weapon and ran straight towards Leopard. Kana judged that she wouldn't believe it if someone else said that, but it didn't seem like he was lying. Erta suddenly notified the guy that he hesitated because he was worried about ruining the hide. Ilhan was surprised and asked when she'd had time to get to know him so well. But Angel replied that his thoughts were obvious. And right now it would be a bit hard to use taijutsu or a spear against him. And he doubted a harpoon would help much, and it looked like the pillars wouldn't last long. Suddenly, Erta notified the guy that the leopard was attacking, and the guy saw his pillar fail. She shouted that he pulled the pole out, but Ilhan saw that the rope didn't break. He had indeed succeeded in making it very strong. But for Erta, now was not the time to have fun. Kana was nearby at this moment and looked at the clock and saw that there was a minute left. It would be her turn in a little while. It was only a matter of time before the other pillars could hold out. Ilhan at this point had already prepared himself and decided to give the monster a taste of the machine gun bullets and called the alien. But Erta redirected him and let him know that this monster was from Earth. Ilhan picked up the target and aimed his fire straight into its eyes. The stats immediately showed that the guy had reached his maximum level in shooting. Erta was surprised that the guy had mastered shooting in such a short time. Kana was also shocked that such a huge damage was from just a rifle. There was a buff on the rifle, but Erta realized that the rifle would be useless against a Class 3 monster anyway. However, Ilhan's shooting skill extended the limits of the weapon. Suddenly, the boy shouted that magic was needed. Kana asked that she needed 7 more seconds. Ilhan realized everything and waited for the moment. Kana started counting down. The moment Ilhan gathered all his harpoons and the girl attacked the leopard with triple lightning. The lightning struck right at the monster's head, but because of the intense brightness, she couldn't see anything in front of her and wondered if she had succeeded. But the leopard endured it all and headed towards the car to destroy the enemy. Ilhan replied to her that there was more to come. But slowly the leopard began to fade away and Kana became worried. Ilhan liked that and picked a moment to let another harpoon into it. Stabbing it into the monster's head, he said that it hadn't worked on him from the start. The leopard couldn't handle that kind of pressure and fell on all 4 paws. Kana realized that the guy had seen it through stealth, and Ilhan, seeing this, took ropes in his hands and tied him up. The stats immediately showed that he had learned the skill of tying. Erta decided to ask him why he wouldn't kill him. Ilhan smiled and replied that he wished to do something, and looked towards the Empress. Kana walked up to him and asked what was wrong. Ilhan held out his hand to her and asked her to make a team. Or does she want him to take all the experience for himself again? Kana was surprised by his offer, but she didn't refuse and shook his hand. Meanwhile, status showed that a team had been formed and the number of participants was 2. Ilhan looked closer and was surprised that he could check the statuses of the team members. It was like his senses had improved. But Kana asked him why he was acting like he had never formed a team before. Ilhan replied that it was a long time ago. The Empress was surprised but didn't believe it, and the guy saw that she was catching on quickly. After that, he approached the monster and, raising his spear above its head, said goodbye to it. Having done his thing, the status immediately showed that he had gained 2 million experience points, and he had reached level 36. Erta was happy for him and said that he had jumped from level 29 to 36 in one go. Suddenly, Ilhan grabbed his head and felt nauseous, and asked her if he was sure he hadn't taken all the experience. There was too much of him, and it looked like she got just as much seeing her face. Erta realized that a third-class monster was different from a second-class monster after all. Ilhan, with the amount of experience he had, now gained a level and rose relatively low, and he must have gotten a lot of penalty points because of his title. Ilhan didn't believe it and doubted it. Coming to his senses, Ilhan felt his head finally stopped hurting. But walking over to the body, he apologized to the beast hide for not being able to protect him. And if he had been stronger, he wouldn't have let it get hurt. Erta was shocked and asked him that he should not apologize to the hide. The guy asked her to let her think for herself. How cool the armor would be if he created it from the hide of a third-class monster. Erta didn't deny it and agreed with him. It was a shame for him and decided to take at least what was left intact. Ilhan was shocked upon cutting it open, for he saw that this monster had a mana stone in its head. Erta let him know that both the mother and the child had mana stones, and it turned out he was lucky. She knew that mana stones were formed when at the moment of the monster's death. The mana that was supposed to leave its body coagulates, and for that reason, it could not be obtained from every monster he killed. She had once heard that the probability of it appearing was around 17%. The lower the class, the higher the probability, and the higher the class, the lower the probability. Erta watched him do everything and said, he was incredibly lucky. All of a sudden, he said he had found one. Erta looked closer and saw that it was huge, but that was to be expected from a third grader. But Ilhan wondered, the third-class monster mana stone was one of the conditions for the evolution of the other skills, and it needs to fulfill the other conditions for evolution. But since the mana stone was in the monster, he figured he should share it with her. Kana told him that she had gotten about 1.5 million experience, so she decided to ask the guy how much he had gotten. Ilhan replied that it was in the neighborhood of 3 million, and Kana realized that the contribution was 2 to 1, and she thought she got too much. Ilhan disagreed with her, because if it wasn't for her, he wouldn't have been able to kill him even at the cost of his own death, and she was very helpful. Kana said she was glad to hear that, and decided to ask him if she would tell him her name, or should she continue to call him Sunbolt. The guy didn't bear it for long and replied that his name was Ilhan. Kana suddenly notified him that he could keep the mana stone. She would just take half of the body if he stripped it himself. And mana stones are about 6 parts in contribution, so that should even things out. Ilhan decided to ask her if she was sure she was okay with it, but Kana decided to ask his opinion. What is the most important job on Earth right now? Ilhan suddenly thought about it and didn't know what to answer. but Kana offered him a couple of options. But in the end, she said no. It's actually the master of cutting. There's no point in killing a bunch of monsters if you can't properly strip them for rewards. And his cutting skills are unparalleled. They are incredibly valuable. Ilhan started cutting while Kana was talking to someone on the phone. Erta heard everything and told the guy that she had a lot of connections, and he should stay on good terms with her. And it's hard to find someone with skills, pride, and background. But Ilhan explained to her that getting close to someone is quite difficult. Erta asked if she had reminded him of another trauma again. Ilhan replied that she didn't know what it was like to be single at all, so he finished with the cutting. Kana, meanwhile, called for men and ordered them to put it all in the trucks. She realized that thanks to Ilhan, they were able to get rid of the monster before it did any more damage. Ilhan thanked her in return for her help, but suddenly she asked him to forget about the fact that they had formed a team. The guy was shocked and thought he had done something wrong, and he did something she didn't like. Kana explained that she just wasn't worthy of being his partner. He's very strong. There's a huge gulf between them. But sooner or later it will catch up with him, and then she will ask him to partner with her. Ilhan replied that he will think about it when the time comes. Kana saw that the guy was reasoning logically, as always. In response, she extended her hand and thanked him for the opportunity. The stats immediately showed that their team had broken up. Ilhan began to feel like he had regained his freedom, and at the same time, like he had lost a teammate. And kind of a refreshing feeling, but a little sad. And the team's status window was gone. The driver at that moment told Kana that it was time for them to go. The girl suddenly remembered something and asked the guy to stop. She asked the guy if he could give her his phone number. Ilhan didn't want to give her his number, but the girl said she wouldn't tell anyone his name or his number. He wondered if he could trust her, and he already knew the answer to that question. Ilhan thought about it and let her know that he would give her his number. And taking her phone, he wrote it down. Kana said goodbye to him and let him know that she would contact him for sure. Ilhan was excited because it was the first time he had gotten a phone number from a girl, and Erta was sad to see how happy he was about something like that. The guy replied that he wasn't happy. He only earned the right to be confident in the eyes of other people, and that made it even sadder. After arriving home, he opened the status, and he couldn't even think that he would kill a third-class monster like that, and doesn't even know when he thought it was impossible, and now realizes that karma actually exists. But Erta was fine with his optimistic attitude. But Guy asked, why didn't that sound like a compliment? But Angel replied that it didn't and that he was. Finding the list about trolls, he saw that he had a problem with them, and he hadn't heard of them showing up on Earth. But Erta told him that if he was a different person, he would just go to another world. Ilhan replied that it's not that he doesn't go there because he doesn't want to. He can't go there. Erta replied that she understood and asked him to calm down. But the concentration of mana on the ground is getting more and more every day. The trolls would soon appear. Ilhan began to wonder if the reason he needed the blood of trolls to evolve his rest skill was because that blood had healing abilities. Erta replied that that was correct, and that was exactly the case, if he has resistance to deadly poisons. But the guy didn't want it to be a damn resistance to poisons. And why did the level increase with every time he talked about it? Resistance to poisons, then resistance to strong poisons, and now resistance to deadly poisons. Can't even imagine what comes next. Erta asked him that he shouldn't even think about drinking the monster's blood or eating its flesh. Only crazy people would do such a thing. And the big problem is the sleeping class 2 monsters, and he needs to kill them in one hit. Suddenly, he picked up his spear and thought he needed to strengthen his weapon a bit. So he asked her to share some harka, but Angel immediately refused him. But the boy pleaded with her not to be a cheapskate. Erta explained that it would turn out to be a huge imbalance. Lending him a hammer and anvil, as it were, was a huge act of kindness, and so now let him make good weapons before she asked for them back. Ilhan rose and replied that he would make what he could, and he would be able to use again after some minor modifications. Erta wondered if it was really made from the bone of a huge leopard. It was certainly sturdy. But Ilhan asked, what would he do with the muscles and tendons? Suddenly, the fireplace lit up and he was frightened. The tendons just fell off his arms and fell right into the fire. He wanted to create a strong antidote and then drink it. Erta replied that they would rot before he could create an antidote. But Ilhan didn't understand. Were these really the effects of the eternal flames? Erta replied that the tendon was changing. But Ilhan asked, why didn't she teach him that? The girl replied that such things were not his specialty. Eternal flame, that's enough. Ilan pulled the item out of the fire and was shocked, saying it was awesome. The main character looked at it and said, "This elasticity is amazing," and he's going to call it the Giant's Rubber Band. Erta wondered what he was going to do with it. The guy replied that although it's very stretchy, it's also strong. It has resistance to fire because it was heated by eternal flames, and it also has resistance to impact and water. And now he will make a jackhammer out of it. Erta realized that this weapon is similar in principle to a firearm, but it doesn't fire bullets, it fires stakes. And if you use tendons to operate it, it becomes more like a crossbow. The jackhammer is not easy to use, but its power is at a high level. He especially wants to mention the piercing power. It's a weapon he's more likely to see in a game than in real life. Ilhan started to say that he uses the elasticity of the Giant's rubber band instead of gunpowder, and it's a better kind of power source, returning more power than he put in. Erta closed her eyes and couldn't help but recognize the infinite energy he now had. And she marveled at the incredible ideas that popped into his head every time. And now even she couldn't wait to see what he would come up with next. Ilan drew a blueprint and said he would adapt it to the limit of his power, and that only monsters like her would be able to use it. He's using the leopard's tooth as bullets. It's much sharper and stronger than his bones, and it will be perfect if he just reinforces it with the leopard's monostone. Erta looked at it and told him that it was already strong enough on its own, and if he was confident enough to fight against a third-class monster before the troll showed up, then he could use it now. Ilan decided that he would save it for later, and now he promises the straggler that he'll get a mana stone, especially for her later. Erta saw that the guy didn't know how to give up. Ilan set to work again and shouted that he had done everything. Erta asked him if he was done yet. Ilhan replied that now he just needed to put the Giant's rubber band on his tooth. And he divided the power into 3 levels. Ilan picked up his gun and felt that he was very steady. The boy tried to handle it, but the power of the weapon was heavier. Erta suddenly started telling him that his mother was in another world. Ilan let go of the weapon and asked how long it took him to charge. Angel replied that 2 seconds. The guy took a closer look and thought that he wouldn't be able to use it for long during real combat. And already on the first level he was calling for his mother, and believes when charging level 3, he would be calling out his distant ancestors. He decided to try it again and call out to his mother. But Erta corrected him that he must mean great-great-grandmother. Erta counted and said 10 seconds for level 2 and 2 minutes for level 3. The stats immediately showed that the light flash debuff was complete. He asked Angel if she could see it. He got the alpha option even without mana crafting, and he would have reduced time spent charging and attacking. Erta replied that with the tooth, his length exceeds 3 meters. That's a clear disadvantage. Ilan asked her if she finds disadvantages everywhere. The guy decided to show her that such a shot will happen in case a giant appears. And now he has to make weapons for smaller monsters. Erta wondered, what was he going to make another weapon? And maybe he should take a break. The next morning, status was already showing that the detailed underground destructive trap had been completed. Ilhan was working non-stop and finishing the work at a tremendous rate. The angels arrived on the ground, and after looking at the work said that it also has an option, and this trap is very good. It could lead to overflow. Erta replied to them that this was 17 destructive trap he had made. He was originally supposed to make 11 more, but it looks like he now has 8 left. The boy asked, was it because of the overflow? Erta, hearing this, was surprised that the guy's quick to grasp. And he's right, his traps are incredibly good. They have a wide range. And they're so good that other destructive traps around the world have been enhanced as well. And if all the monsters were attracted by just one strong destructive trap, then the remaining traps would be left empty. And if he continued to spread mana in an area without monsters for the sake of attracting them, what did he think would happen? Ilhan suggested that the humans would fall into the trap instead, but Erta replied that they wouldn't. The random recordings of the Akasha Chronicles and the mana of the traps would collide. Eventually, new monsters would be born. But Ilhan didn't understand and asked her to explain like he was 5 years old. Erta replied that a super strong monster would appear by cutting its own entrance in the trap. Ilhan rejoiced, for it made more sense to him that way, and now he realized how terrible the overflow was, and he wished he could stay away from third-class monsters right now. And he had succeeded in killing the ghost leopard, only because his ability was stealth. But even so, he couldn't defeat it alone. He wouldn't be able to kill Class 3 monsters with his current strength. Erta realized that was why they would reduce the number of traps to prevent overflow. But then Angel came over and said that he was greatly annoyed by the appearance of so many unexpected things on the ground, and especially him, and advised Erta that he'd better get this man under good control. Erta replied to him that the guy wasn't a person they were controlling. She was given orders to help him, and she wasn't told to watch him and limit his abilities. Angel saw and spoke up saying she was so adamant. Erta summoned her mana, and a weapon called Shuta appeared in her hand. She pointed it at Angel and told him to focus on his duties instead of ordering her what to do. Ilan was greatly surprised, for he had never seen Erta angry before. But suddenly one of the angels asked him why he was meddling in the wrong things, and he shouldn't meddle in Erta's affairs. He should better watch his duties. Angel approached her and asked her that she should not get angry. She's sure that Shuta didn't want to interfere with her work. Ilan realized that angels are no different from humans, besides the fact that they are higher creatures. Erta looked like an ordinary human too. After everything, the angels all gathered and went to heaven. Erta suddenly said that she had shown him a side of herself that she shouldn't have revealed. But Ilhan replied that she hadn't, and it was unexpected in a good way. He is surprised that angels are able to show their emotions, and he doesn't even know if he's smart or not. Erta told him that angels have long since gotten away from pathetic emotions, but Ilhan replied that it's not like that guy got away from them. And so Erta admitted that he's wonderful, and she's talking about how his talents and skills are at such a high level to make even Angel envious. Ilhan smiled and replied that she was overestimating him, as always. But Erta said he was the one underestimating her, and she saw that the guy thought too low of himself, but in a way that wasn't a bad thing, if he believed in himself too much and defied God. But she said aloud that she shouldn't think too much about it. Ilhan asked why not. Erta tells him that she has to tell him something about the reward for the destructive trap assignment anyway. Ilhan agrees to only material things. But Erta replied to him that he would change his mind once he heard what she had to say. There is a new kind of metal in the dungeon that has appeared on the ground. She will tell him where it is. Ilhan got excited and asked her to tell him everything. But the next day, Ilhan went outside and saw that no one was there. Erta asked him if this was like the days when he was all alone. The boy thought for a moment and replied that not much at all. Things are very different now. It's not like he doesn't know when everyone will be back. And there are people like the Empress here, fighting monsters. And that's why he's not alone anymore. Meanwhile, they arrived at the forest, and Angel showed him the way. Ilan saw the portal and decided to find out, is this the entrance to the dungeon? And he's glad it's in Korea. He was able to reach it on foot. Because of the state of emergency, he can't leave the country's border. No one can cross it by boat or airplane. So he wondered if he could construct an airplane himself. Erta got tired of waiting and asked him if they could start. Ilan put his hand on the portal and realized it was the entrance to the dungeon. But suddenly a refusal came, and the status showed that the entrance was forbidden to all people below level 50. Ilan started yelling that it says that no one below level 50 can enter. He's still at level 36. Erta asked the guy what he thought she was. Ilhan replied that a rude angel, a trespasser on property. Erta said she was a supreme creature, creating destructive traps and controlling them. The girl used her powers, and the status showed that the restriction on entry was lifted. She then said that it could now go in. Ilan was surprised and found her more useful than he thought. But Angel asked him to keep that in mind. She was an incredibly useful assistant to him. Ilan put up his hand and saw that he had entered another world. He began to wonder how things functioned here. Erta replied that he was the one who had created it. So she decided to give him a quiz and asked him, how do new monsters appear on Earth? Ilan replied that she said it happens when the mana in the atmosphere reaches a certain concentration. That was the most basic condition. But Angel didn't stop there and asked who appears in abandoned jars of rice. The guy replied that it was rice weevils, but she asked who shows up in rooms that are not cleaned and have leftovers lying around. The guy again gave her the right answer, saying it was cockroaches. Erta explained that the monsters are similar to rice weevils and cockroaches. They appear in the perfect environment for them. But he didn't understand why she decided to choose such examples. And why did she bring it up? Erta replied that from this day forward, he would have to kill the monsters in this dungeon and extract their hearts. And that was the metal that came from the earth. But Ilhan didn't understand why she was telling him this now.